Aaron Bushnell engaged in an extreme form of protest, self-immolation, because he didn't want to be complicit in the genocide in Gaza. When Aaron Bushnell says he doesn't want to be complicit with a genocide, that is not a platitude. He is a serviceman under the Air Force. The Biden administration deployed the Air Force to help Israel carry out their genocide. U.S. military servicemen are supposed to decline unlawful orders. So instead of being retaliated against by the military industrial complex because he refused to follow their genocidal orders, Aaron Bushnell decided to engage in extreme acts of protest in order to expose this insanity. I can't stress enough how devastating this is for the United States and Israel. Aaron Bushnell exposed the United States and Israel with one selfless act. Aaron Bushnell is being praised, rightfully so, as an anti-genocide icon all around the world. This is why Western media is having a horrible time covering this story. I have seen countless articles and countless segments on corporate media where they don't even talk about why Aaron Bushnell did what he did. That's why they're already smearing him and disrespecting his action by calling him mentally ill. Did you guys know there was someone who engaged in self-immolation in December in protest of the Gaza genocide? The media quickly buried that story. Their name wasn't even released. But Aaron Bushnell made a very powerful Facebook post before his act. Aaron Bushnell also live streamed the act so the media couldn't ignore him. These are very tactical moves that Aaron made designed to maximize the effect of his action. Aaron Bushnell did not want you to feel bad for him. The Biden administration obsession with funding and enabling Israel's genocide is what directly led to Aaron's death, and all our anger should be directed at him.
I don't think for many voters who are voting uncommitted that they're going to vote uncommitted and then say Donald Trump is my choice. I think this is more complicated than that.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Bakari. I mean, no one that I interface with said that they wanted to vote for Donald J. Trump. There is a however here. And I think sometimes as we talk about this issue, we're centering President Biden. We are centering former President Donald J. Trump when the uncommitted effort is to center the people closest to the pain. And that is the Arab American community. That is the Palestinian community. That is communities that care about peace. And so while this president was in the ice cream shop saying, I think there's going to be a ceasefire, 30,000 people have been slaughtered. People are living in famine. They can't get medical care. So it can't come soon enough for them. And that was really the weight that I picked up on when I was in Dearborn. So we get to be comfortable and talk about this like these people are widgets when they are in fact suffering. And I am young enough to remember, colleagues, when Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and also Congresswoman Cori Bush called for a ceasefire very early on. They were called abhorrent. Now, fast forward to all of these bodies laying in the wake and people who are living through this every single day.
So by the way, there's also been slaughter in Israel.
I was going to say.
So there's a lot of pain on both sides.
No,
so
I'm not.
I'm not lecture on the problem, but I'm talking about the politics of this tonight. What to you would be a victory, as somebody was calling for this uncommitted vote? What to you would be a victory tonight to get that message across?
I'm not denying that pain. All I'm saying that at a certain point after October the 7th, it becomes clear. I mean, you have a right-wing prime minister.
Right. We don't need to debate the issue.
But you understand, I'm not denying anybody's pain. What I am saying is that this president and our country has the power to say to Netanyahu, We need a permanent ceasefire. The only time
Within
hostages,
reason, though, if I can push back here,
wait, one more point. The only time hostages were released is when we had that brief ceasefire. That is another reason why we need a permanent ceasefire.
I also have to remind people we had a ceasefire prior to October 7th, right? I mean, that's a point. And I get centering people, and I completely understand that. But I think, Anderson, your point is valid as well, that there is a lot of pain to go around, and we cannot forget that. But I'm talking about tangible solutions. That's what I'm. And as we look at because we can debate and talk about this on a level of humanity, which we cannot forget. But we also have to look at the results from tonight. And what I'm saying is that there are tangible results this White House can deliver, and I think if they're able to deliver it, now if they miss, then you have a totally different scenario.
And here's the reality. If I may briefly defend Joe Biden, there hasn't been a day since October 7th that he hasn't been working around the clock, his National Security Council, his State Department, with the Qataris, with the Israeli government to try to come to a cessation of hostilities.
He thinks the president is also the president of Mexico, but that's okay.
They do have a massive messaging problem, though. They have allowed this sort of discontent with young progressives to take so much steam that you're seeing it play out in real time. And a problem that they might run into, if this is something that ends up being upwards of 50,000 votes tonight, are other states going to follow? Are there going to be other organizing efforts in primaries to show that they won't be with Biden unless they see a change in policy?
Yes, the Uncommitted campaign is going to go. I mean, I've been told that campaign is going to go into other states.
And Congressman, on the Republican side.
Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Straight Outta Politics. I'm your host for today. I'm CJ. Looks like Nina Turner, and this is just part of that interview, but Nina Turner obviously triggered all the people who are in the back pockets of AIPAC and Zionists. You saw all of them kind of get shot. Oh, what's going on here? Nina Turner is using too much language that's close to the truth, that's not appropriate for public consumption, at least not on corporate media. But anyway, welcome to the show. Like I said, this is Straight Outta Politics. We got a lot to talk about today, and let me actually take you through that. So let's toss up the graphic. And from left to right, we're going to start with the Nina story, because like I said, that's the longest clip, but there's some other shorter clips where it's a little bit more contentious. And then moving from left to right, Joe Biden, more than 100,000 people came out and voted uncommitted in the Michigan campaign. And that also includes Rashida Tlaib there. And then we had this last nugget of information fall in our laps before this stream. The return of Marianne Williamson. She is back. She is unsuspended her campaign because she came in third place in Michigan. She saw that third place finish. She's like, I need to get off the couch and get in the game. Remember she said that about Bernie Sanders? Get in the game. She kept saying it like that. I thought it was funny. So there's that story. And then if we have a chance to fit it in, we're going to also cover Wolf Blitzer talks about the effectiveness of vote shaming. And then tied all of this, part of the more than 100,000 people voting uncommitted, we're going to tie in. We're going to also point out how Joe Biden, remember he came out the day of ceasefire is coming up on Monday. Remember he said that? Wasn't it sort of a coincidence that he came out and said something like that while eating ice cream, by the way, right before the vote for uncommitted? So possibly his attempt to try to affect that vote, but it didn't work. It didn't work. So those are the topics. We're going to get back to the Nina story to start us out with. But before we get started, make sure you hit that like button. 800 is always the target on all of our live streams. So hit that like button. That helps other people to see it. It helps us fight the algorithm. And it brings more eyes to our content if you do so. Now, if you're wondering what happened to our video on Aaron Bushnell, YouTube took it down. you know, when we covered it, it was Nick and CJ show on Monday. YouTube removed that video. Now, of course, we all know it's because of the Aaron Bushnell part of the video. They used something else, which is the intro music, which is why I didn't play it today. You know the intro music that I usually play? I'll briefly play it. Remember the intro music? So there's part of that, I guess, that one artist has a copyright, and it appears there's been some finagling where YouTube reaches out specifically about that video to say, hey, you want your music used on this. So that's why I didn't use the intro video today. But anyway, now let's get back to the stories. Actually, let me make sure I don't have any thing to put up here. Yeah, they do that all the time. They did that with a story Nick covered about some military action that was not covered by, they wanted to keep secret, basically, from the American public. They snatched that and took that whole video down too. Now we get not copyright strikes, but we get copyright hits all the time. Copyright. Literally more than half our videos are not monetized because it's copyright. It's very seldom that they go copyright and remove the video. This is probably the third time since we've been RBN where they actually remove the video, and it's always with very touchy subjects that they happen to use copyright to remove the video, and they did that this time. Luckily, our editor Aaron had already downloaded the video, so there will be clips, and those will be coming. So if you didn't get a chance to watch it, the clips will be coming. But that was the reason they used to take the video down. It's anything they can use to remove content that is talking about the establishment, the empire, they'll use. So let's get back to the topic at hand. And what I want to do is come back to the Nina Turner video, because I was debating whether to start out with it or not, and it just felt right to start out with it. But let's now go to the overarching story, and Nina Turner's included in it because it's about the same thing, and that's more than 1,000 people voted uncommitted last night. And the needless to say, the establishment is in shambles, but they're in shambles where they're trying to pretend like they're not panicking. And that's what you saw with this little short snippet of interview with Nina Turner, was them reacting, the establishment. And to me, how they all sort of leaped into action to sort of protect the establishment. Even the girl that used to be on The Hill and now she's on The View, and she was in that CNN panel, she's a Republican, and she wanted to step in. That tells you how it's or that indicates or shows you how it's a uniparty. But let's get to the main video we're going to start with. And there's a lot of video content to kind of go over here. But we're going to start with the main video. And that main video is going to be coming from, which show is this? Inside Politics. John King used to be on it, but Dana Bash is now the host of Inside Politics. Let me see if this is working or not. But Dana Bash is now the host of Inside Politics. Let me just refresh this here. And they had to cover it. I think it was their third segment. It's unavoidable. Joe Biden yesterday, with the primary going, he ended the night with a statement, nothing about the uncommitted vote. Oh, wow. There's something going on here. Hey, hang on a second here. Let me take this down and see. What is the holdup? Don't tell me something's going on here. Okay. Let's try again. Let's try this again.
Time for you,
okay.
EPA's safer.
All right, so it is working. All right, so
closed captioning is brought to you by Page Publishing. Want to publish a book?
Let's bring it back
for your dog's needs.
Oh, actually,
it's an
still
idea
there.
whose time has come.
Anyway, let's now get to it. My apologies, everybody, but having some technical difficulty. Let's move it now into place so we don't have any other technical difficulty. And that's going to be right about here. All right. So again, let me preface it since because of the technical difficulty. Let me preface this the right way. And that is more than 100,000 people came out in Michigan yesterday to vote uncommitted. And I must say that's 100,000 and counting. The last time I saw it was about to cross 102,000. But it was still it hadn't even hit 90 percentile as far as the reporting of the vote. So we'll see what it ends up at. Maybe it'll end up around 110, 120, something like that, as far as when the last count is in. That would be actually awesome. But let's listen to how corporate media is precisely how CNN and Dana Bash is covering this news. Let's start out there.
Publishing. Want to publish a book? We'll review your manuscript for free.
If you've written a book, Page Publishing can help you through the process. We cut.
There we go.
Uncommitted over President Joe Biden. That, of course, was the result of a protest campaign over the administration's handling of the Israel-Gaza war. The chair of the Progressive Caucus in Congress, Pramila Jayapal, told Armanu Raju that this protest was no surprise, saying, quote, "This is exactly what I warned about several months ago. The war on Gaza is a deep moral issue, and the lack of attention and empathy for this perspective from the administration is breaking apart the fragile coalition we built to elect Joe Biden in 2020. It's not just the far left. Listen to what the number 2 Senate Democrat said this morning.
I am worried. I've talked to them, and I know they feel very strongly and have a right to. The situation facing Palestinians in Gaza is horrible. It's a humanitarian disaster, and the sooner the hostilities come to an end and the sooner the relief is delivered, the sooner we're going to see some, I think, people sitting back and taking stock of what the real choices are in November.
Our panel is back now. Jeff Zeleny, you just came back from Michigan this morning, right? And I know you've got some new reporting on what's going on in the Democratic Party.
Senator Durbin talking there about needing a solution. I mean, this is an example of where there is a deep political problem, but it is likely only to be resolved by a policy solution. And this is something
that is very unusual for the establishment. They're in a unique, not a unique, what's a different word to use? They are in a position that they don't commonly find themselves in, a position where a group of voters or a group of constituency is standing their ground, holding the line on a policy position and demanding the change in the policy position for the vote. Typically, i.e., for example, the Black community, which is a voting constituency, is another part of the coalition that is sorely needed, could do this same thing, but that is a group that has not chosen to hold the Democratic Party to a standard like this. But you've seen how effective it is. They've been trying to ignore this campaign, not give it the sort of framing that it deserves. And I shouldn't say campaign to ignore, because they had not ignore the uncommitted campaign, but ignore this constituency that it's upset at the policy in occupied Palestine. So let's listen to a little more. I thought this video was a little bit revealing. I thought that this segment on here was a little bit revealing some of the things they talk about in a segment, for example, how Pramila Jayapal says the lack of empathy for the pro-Palestinian position is breaking apart the Biden coalition. And I can't remember what video I have that's going to speak more to that. I think it's another CNN clip where the panelists say there's been too many times. Actually, I think it might be in here. So actually, let me let it play it. I think it's towards the end, but let me let it play some more. I think it's part of this video here.
Something that talking to a variety of Michigan Democrats during my time reporting there, one said the anger will not be resolved with meetings. It will take bold action. So they're really calling on President Biden to do something bold, to keep distancing himself from Prime Minister Netanyahu, which he's done. I mean, if you track the timeline of President Biden's own response to this since October 7th,
absolutely,
he's already heard this message. This did not come as a surprise to him. The number did. The 101,000 people. I talked to one Michigan Democrat who supports Joe Biden yesterday, and he said anything over 50,000, that could be an issue. It was twice that, 100,000. But in addition to that, this could be a floor. Another warning sign I heard from a Michigan Democrat who, again, wants President Biden to be reelected, said it took an act to go out and vote uncommitted. What about the people who didn't vote? Young.
Right. So think about that. The dissatisfaction number is likely to be twice, if not 3 times as high, because the people who came out and actually registered the 100,000+, those are people so motivated and discussed to actually physically come out because of fight traffic, work, and all this stuff, stand in line to vote in a primary that they know Biden is going to win. I would say there's probably at least twice as many as that amount of people who are simply saying, fuck all of this shit and I'm just staying home. So that's the number that's not showing up in this. But I would assume any of these people who are part of this campaign, they have to assume that if people are showing up saying, registering this, there has to be at least the same amount of people, if not more, who is staying home because of the same reason. That's just a logical point. But let's get back to the video.
Young people in Ann Arbor, in Lansing, across the state, the apathy and just a disinterest in this campaign, that is, in the words of this Democrat, a much more worrisome sign. So look, the warning signs are there. Former Congressman Andy Levin told me last night.
Now look at that. That's 101,108. And what's the percentage? Oh, that's 95% reporting. So I said earlier, it hadn't hit 90%. That's 95% support reporting, not supporting. If you see right above to the left of the live CNN sign, you'll see 95% right there in the bottom corner there. And what I also, actually, I want to wait for them to make the point before I counter the point.
Last night, after you interviewed him, actually, he was standing in Dearborn. He said, this could be a constructive effort. It sends a warning sign in advance to the White House. They have 8 months to sort of figure this out.
Yeah, and Leanne, I know you all have been doing extensive reporting on this, but because you mentioned Andy Levin, he was a congressman from a very well-known Democratic political family in Michigan. Listen to part of our conversation last night.
Dana, my goal here personally was to get through to the president's campaign that there is no political solution to this problem. I don't see how we can win the White House again without winning Michigan. And I don't think we can win Michigan unless the president changes course on Gaza.
Man.
And Leanne, I think you all noticed that last night, the Biden campaign put out a statement that was
So again, that was Andy Levin. If you've been watching our reporting on this Uncommitted campaign from the beginning, you've seen many clips of Andy because he's been part of from the beginning. And understand, he is a pro vote blue, no matter who sort of Democrat. That's who Andy Levin is. Let me turn this volume off here. That's who Andy Levin is. So Andy Levin is who's down on the ground in Michigan and saying, okay, this shit is so bad. We need to do this uncommitted just so people can voice their frustration and so that we can show the Democratic Party this is a real problem that requires a policy change if you want to win, because he does have Trump derangement syndrome, to be quite frank with you, Andy Levin, that is. But let's continue.
Kind of vanilla and didn't mention uncommitted, vanilla about winning Michigan.
Right.
That changed this morning when they saw the numbers go up, 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 up. Here's what the campaign said this morning. President Biden shares the goal of many of the folks who voted uncommitted, which is an end to violence and a just and lasting peace. That is what he is working towards. We will earn their votes between now and November.
Yeah, they are realizing, I think, after these results last night that it is a huge challenge for him. Of course, now Michigan has one of the biggest Arab American communities in the country. Pennsylvania is another state that has high percentages as well. But Michigan is, what Andy Levin said is absolutely right, that it is necessary to win for Biden or presumably Trump to be the nominee. But there's also a lot of warning signs for Donald Trump, too.
No, there's not. They're making up that up. We'll talk
That's a
about
good
that in a
point.
little
I
bit.
want to say that I think that Democrats have to decide who they are and what they stand for in this moment.
This is what I was talking about
It's not
here.
only Arab Americans in terms of a marginalized
So
group
actually,
that
let me pause so we can make sure we really zero in on this part. What is this? Because this is, I don't know her name, but she's the one who comes in and says Dems has basically treated their parts of their coalition as expendable. Hearing the cries of Medicare for all from progressives, hearing voting rights from the Black community, hearing immigrant rights from people in the Latin community. Like they've been hearing all of these things and just kind of, who are you going to vote for? The other side? So you can't have that sort of team position, because supposedly that is a team. You can't have that sort of team position, and that having that team position long term doesn't erode your support. Eventually, some people, the Black community, go, oh no, I'm done with this shit. Eventually, some people in the Latin community are going to go, oh, I'm done with this shit. And just think about what the Biden administration is currently have been doing in the last 6 months, trying to placate the let me just call it the racist tendencies of how they view immigration, and the Democrats moving to the right on that, with willing to scrap asylum. What do they think that's going to do to their coalition? Democrats not delivering on voting rights for the Black people who do support them. I'm not in favor of those voting rights acts, but the Black people who do support the Democrats didn't deliver on that. Didn't deliver on minimum wage for anybody. Didn't deliver on climate for young people in the way that he promised. So you can't keep not delivering in these areas and then this coalition stays together. That's what this lady right here articulates. Let me just rewind it just a little bit and let her. It's the Black lady with the I think she has dreads or braids on.
For Donald Trump, too. And there have been throughout the entire campaign.
That's a good point.
I want to say that I think that Democrats have to decide who they are and what they stand for in this moment. It's not only Arab Americans in terms of a marginalized group that feel as though they are treated as expendable by the Democratic Party. Right now, you have, mixed families with undocumented folks, but with citizen children that are feeling alienated. You have Black voters feeling alienated as well. And I think for a long time, this is beyond President Biden. Democrats have treated some of the parts of their coalition as expendable, and they can't afford to continue to do that without really voters saying in a very loud
Watch the
way
reaction to what she's saying.
You mentioned the Republicans, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that Nikki Haley is still in the race. She didn't compete at all in Michigan, and she still got, she didn't win at all, but she got a sizable amount of the vote. I had a conversation.
Now, your reaction might be the same as mine. Huh? What? Did you hear what the previous lady just said, Dana? They do this in media, I've noticed, and I saw it in another clip a couple of days ago where the person made such a devastating point specifically about the Democratic Party and or Joe Biden, and they literally go, huh? and pivot and just completely not even acknowledge what the person says and goes on a completely different track. Just right here, I'm going to rewind it for the last 15 seconds for you to see that ridiculousness one more time. Let me let her say a little bit more of the great points that she makes here. So let's start from the beginning.
and throughout the entire campaign.
That's a good point.
I want to say that I think that Democrats have to decide who they are and what they stand for in this moment. It's not only Arab Americans in terms of a marginalized group that feel as though they are treated as expendable by the Democratic Party. Right now, you have, mixed families with undocumented folks, but with citizen children that are feeling alienated. You have Black voters feeling alienated as well. And I think for a long time, this is beyond President Biden. Democrats have treated some of the parts of their coalition as expendable. And they can't afford to continue to do that without really voters saying in a very loud way that the jig is up.
Now, I'm going to rewind it here. It's something I just noticed.
President Biden. Democrats have treated some of the parts of their coalition as
Dana
expendable.
Bansh's hand.
And they can't
She's
afford
clearly
to continue
getting
to
something
do that
told to her in her ear. Look, see how she's getting told something in her ear. That's why she's ready to move on. They're telling her, move on from this shit.
Sight of the fact that Nikki Haley.
Because it wasn't an indication for her to be ready to talk based on the person in the same studio her as she's saying. It wasn't like she was coming to. So let me jump in. She's clearly hearing something in her ear to move on from the producers. That lets you know they have no capacity. They have no desire for real analysis of what's happening to be actually talked about in the public sphere. They have no real desire for that. Anytime that happens, they literally skirt away, if not just technical difficulties. Then mics start going out. We've all seen that in a few stories. So that is probably the recent story. This is the recent update. I'm going to give you some more recent updates, but what I do want to do is go to Twitter so that we can kind of go through a chronological telling of how we got to this part here, or got where we are with this uncommitted vote, and what it says about the Biden administration, what it says about what's going to be happening in November for Joe Biden, and if it indicates, is this putting more pressure on the Democratic convention to switch out Joe Biden? Like, is this uncommitted vote putting pressure on Joe Biden in that way? Now I'm going to play you the video, I'm going to get back to a little bit of this, the Nina Turner part here. And you saw part of the video was the intro of Nina Turner, and I'll get back to that video again. But let's listen to a snippet here. I think this is David Axelrod responding to Nina Turner. Let's listen.
But I just have to one last word on this, Nina. You mentioned the ceasefire and the last ceasefire. That last ceasefire happened in part because the president pushed for that ceasefire. He's clearly trying to use his leverage to bring this ceasefire about. And I'm one who I was appalled and personally wounded by what happened on October 7th. And I weep for the kids in Gaza as well. I don't think you can hold both thoughts at once, but I do believe, I don't think that, he's not green lighting these activities. He's clearly trying to pressure the Israelis on this issue.
Well, actually, no.
I'm going to rewind that because it is important before she speaks to hear this again. Nina Turner went on there and was just basically delivering basic facts about what's happening in Gaza that corporate media has not been covering. So when Nina Turner introduces these this framing of the Gaza genocide that has never been exposed on corporate media, this is the reaction you get. All the corporate people understand this is not a framing that can exist here in this corporate space without being relentlessly attacked, even if it means using lies as receipts, which David Axelrod uses here. Let's listen to David.
But I just have to one last word on this, Nina. You mentioned the ceasefire and the last ceasefire. That last ceasefire happened in part because the president pushed for that ceasefire. He's clearly trying to use.
He's basically trying to speak to the nickname that he has, Genocide Joe, because David Axelrod can say this, but what we also know is that Joe Biden has bypassed Congress twice to get weapons and ammunition to Israel. And what's happening in the UN? How many times has the United States, by direction of the Biden administration, has voted down a ceasefire? So you can't, you get what I'm saying? You're comparing your virtue signal versus actual policy by the United States empire. So let's continue with this obvious and futile attempt to rebrand Joe Biden.
To use his leverage to bring this ceasefire about. And like I'm one who I was appalled and personally wounded by what happened on October 7th. And I weep for the kids in Gaza as well. I don't think you can hold both thoughts at once, but I do believe, I don't think that, he's not green lighting these activities.
He's not green lighting these activities. What exactly does that mean when he says Joe Biden is not green lighting these activities? No one is saying Joe Biden is drawing up the plans for the IDF, the actual strategy plans on the ground. But if you are the financier, the weapons provider to the people who are coming up with the strategy of attack in Gaza, and that strategy is ending in ceasefire, I just don't, I don't get it. But let's let it play a little bit more. I got a lot more to say here.
He's clearly trying to pressure the Israelis on this issue.
Well, actually, no doubt about it. October the 7th, horrible, should never have happened. You don't kill innocent people. No way, no how.
Now, this is the part where I do have critique for Nina Turner, because she says a lot of great things about the conditions, or accurate things, pinpoint things about the conditions of what's happening in Gaza and how people in the progressive community view it. But this is the part, what she's doing here is the part where social democrats have made a deal with. As long as I can come in here and say the things that she's already said, okay, I will agree to go ahead with these talking points. I'm tired of seeing people feel the need, anytime they talk about Palestine, you have to talk about something that happened on October 7th. You have to go ahead and say, let me acknowledge what happened on October 7th is terrible. You don't see the same thing when you're talking about something that happens with Israel. Oh, another hostage has died. You don't go, let me go ahead and say, but what's happening in Palestine, 30,000 people are dead. You don't do that. So it's a clear bias. It's a clear bias. Maybe it's a bias by fear. It almost seems like they're fearful if they don't speak up about this, that something's going to happen. And social democrats are fearful that they can't go too far by not being on board with the same sort of temperament about October 7th and Hamas. It is a flaw, a blind spot for the social democrats.
Wow. There is a point, and I want to go back to something the congressman said. I think these issues are intertwined. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think to the extent that you have people who are burdened with domestic challenges, what is happening overseas is a reflection of that anxiety that we are having here. My only point is that being on the ground and talking to people, when you're the person who has lost a family member on either side, right? you're saying relief cannot come soon enough. And that is something that we should not forget.
Let's go back.
Yeah, because they jumped on her back, and we're gonna revisit that video where they jumped on her back now. So this is also part of the video, or this was the trigger part to the video we just saw. That video came after this because they all jumped on her, and then she, they simmered back down here.
I don't think for many voters who are voting uncommitted that they're going to vote uncommitted and then say Donald Trump is my choice. I think this is more complicated than that.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Bakari. I mean, no one that I interface with said that they wanted to vote for Donald J. Trump. There is a however here. And I think sometimes as we talk about this issue, we're centering President Biden. We are centering former President Donald J. Trump when the uncommitted effort is to center the people closest to the pain. And that is the Arab American community. That is the Palestinian community. That is communities that care about peace. And so while this president was in the ice cream shop saying, I think there's going to be a ceasefire.
This is the part I believe that was triggering to them. The part about the ice cream, because that's the narrative that's coming out about him. That's the rub about the announcement, the bogus announcement, might I add, about a ceasefire possibly happening, because Netanyahu heard that and was like, what? That's news to me. And John Kirby looked pretty surprised himself in that news conference. If I might get a chance to play that for you, but let's continue.
Ceasefire, 30,000 people have been slaughtered. People are living in famine. They can't get medical care. So it can't come soon enough for them. And that was really the weight that I picked up on when I was in Dearborn. So we get to be comfortable and talk about this like these people are widgets when they are in fact suffering. And I am young enough to remember, colleagues, when Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
This is another triggering point. They didn't like the ice cream comment, but another triggering point is this part, how progressives have been calling for a ceasefire long before we hit 30,000 bodies. That triggered them. So let's listen.
And also Congresswoman Cori Bush called for a ceasefire very early on. They were called abhorrent. Now, fast forward to all of these bodies laying in the wake and people who are living through this every single day.
So by the way, there's also been slaughter in Israel.
I was going to say.
You see, there can't be more than 30 seconds of Palestinian pain discussed without Israeli has to be inserted. Why is it so offensive to you, Anderson Cooper, to talk about Palestinian suffering without talking about Israeli suffering? Why is that so offensive to you? Why are we equating, and it's the literally sheer number, why are we equating 30,000 dead bodies with 1,500, and that's a high estimate? It is not the same, Anderson Cooper. It is not. But it is offensive to me that you're offended by people talking about Palestinian pain. But they have to talk about Israeli pain at the same time. I don't think so.
So there's a lot of pain on both sides.
No,
I'm not a lecture on the problem, but I'm talking about the politics of this tonight. What to you would be a victory, as somebody was calling for this uncommitted vote, what to you would be a victory tonight to get that message across?
I'm not denying that pain.
Here's another flaw. She got pushed on the point by the establishment. This is what social democrats do. And then she kowtows. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Israel paid too. Fuck that shit, man. 30,000 people versus 1,500? Get the fuck out of here.
Pain. All I'm saying that at a certain point.
I can tell you, I don't give a fuck about no Israeli pain.
After October the 7th, it becomes clear. I mean, you have a right-wing prime minister.
Right. We don't need to
who
debate
has
the
said,
issue.
but you understand, I'm not denying anybody's pain. What I am saying is that this president.
Why can't she say what she wants to say, Anderson? Why is she the one you keep censoring? You may see 6 or 7 different people on that stage, but you really see 1.5 different point of view. Nina Turner has half of their view, half of their establishment view. The rest of it, everybody's in lockstep with the establishment. Even the Republicans.
And our country has the power to say to Netanyahu, we need a permanent ceasefire. The only time
Within
hostages,
reason, though, if I can push back here,
wait, one more point. The
here.
only time hostages were released is when we had that brief ceasefire. That is another reason why we need a permanent ceasefire.
I also have to remind people we had a ceasefire prior to October 7th.
Of course, the Ricardi Sellers top Negro servant had to come in saying before October 7th, we had a ceasefire. And he could say that at the same time, and we all know this because we reported on this, 2023 was one of the most deadliest years for people living in Gaza. But he's saying before October 7th, there was a ceasefire.
Right. I mean, that's a point. And I get centering people, and I
No, you don't get center. Anytime somebody says, I get blah, blah, blah. No, you don't. No, you don't.
completely understand that. But I think, Anderson, your point is valid as well, that there is a lot of pain to go around, and we cannot forget that. But I'm talking.
No. Sorry. No. It is not a lot of same pain going around. It's not equal at all. Show me the part of the West Bank or Israel where the people were kidnapped. Show me where the entire infrastructure is destroyed. Show me that part. Show me where these people, Israelis who were kidnapped, show me where their families were displaced, sir. Show me that.
I'm talking about a tangible solutions. That's what I'm. And as we look at because we can debate and talk about this on a level of humanity, which we cannot forget. But we also have to look at the results from tonight. And what I'm saying is that there are tangible results this White House can deliver. And I think if they're able to deliver it, now if they miss, then you have a totally different scenario.
And here's the reality. If I may briefly defend Joe Biden, there hasn't been a day since October.
If I may briefly defend Joe Biden, and I'm on the red team. So, like I said, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, then Nina Turner on the stage, but this is really 6 against 1. And six against a half, really. It's really 6.5 against a half, because half of what Nina Turner says is the establishment talking point. You got this person who's supposed to be a Republican saying, if I may defend Joe Biden.
If I may briefly defend Joe Biden, there hasn't been a day since October 7th that he hasn't been working around the clock, his National Security Council, his State Department.
There hasn't been a day since October 7th that he has been working around the clock on this. Did that include the ice cream break? Why would a Republican interject here? Why would she do that? Because Nina Turner went too far. So even the Republicans got to be, okay, this is too much. Because even she went out of the bounds of what's acceptable of public discourse on corporate media. But I prolonged the point. Let's get back to the presentation. There's a lot more video to go, and let's get to it. A lot more receipts to get through here, because I want to tell this story holistically. I mean, I want to tell the entire story, not holistically. This next clip is just simply for the first maybe 30 seconds, but I thought this was telling. I thought it was jarring. What this guy says here in the first maybe 20 seconds would be very jarring for a Democratic strategist to hear this.
Joe Biden failed the humanity. So Muslim American community, our message, yes, indeed. February 27th in Michigan, we are voting uncommitted. The devil would come and replace Joe Biden. I will vote for the devil to replace Joe Biden.
That guy says, I would vote for the devil to replace Joe Biden. That's some devastated shit right there, because what is he speaking to? He's speaking to lesser of two evil. And he's saying the devil is the lesser of two evils if Joe Biden is on the other side. Devastating to any Democratic strategist to hear. We can listen to a little bit of more people speak and then we'll move on. But it's not a lot in this video we're going to cover.
We're all voting uncommitted. Yeah.
We are voting uncommitted.
All right, a lot to watch for there as Democrats upset with President Biden pushing.
So yeah, like I said, they go off on their right-wing sort of tangent on nonsense. So that's not what I'm covering here. We covered that. Now let's just go through just some reaction here and of the uncommitted vote on corporate media's different segments they've been going through. This video here is right before the vote or before the vote tallies are in. And let's listen to this Michigan state rep. This is a Michigan state rep. So this is a Democrat. Listen to what he says here.
Some perspective now from one of the Michigan Democrats who is pushing for this uncommitted protest vote. We have with us State Representative Alabas Farhat. Alabas, thank you so much for being with us. What message are you trying to send President Biden by voting uncommitted?
Yeah, I want to make it clear that today's vote is an appeal to the White House. It is an appeal to President Biden to be the leader that we know he can, the leader that he promised the nation he would be in 2020 when he campaigned saying that he was going to restore dignity and humanity to the White House. Right now, thousands of Michiganders are watching overseas, their loved ones dying, children starving to death, and they're hearing the screams of parents who are holding their children, their lifeless children. But right now, we're hoping to push the president on a secure ceasefire now, and let's end the killing of innocent civilians overseas. Let's restore humanitarian aid, right? Let's start working towards a lasting peace process. That's the appeal of Michigan voters today when they vote uncommitted.
In recent weeks, President Biden has gone further in publicly criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu's government and his policies, calling the IDF response over the top. He also reinstalled actions against settlers in the West Bank. Obviously, you would like to see him do more. So I'm wondering what specifically you would like to see him change in his approach to the Israeli leadership.
Look, I'm really glad that you honed it in on the Israeli leadership, because that's what this is, right? The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, I think has actively worked against a lasting peace process. He's went out there and made statements saying that there can be no peace deal, or that they'd rather recover the hostages through force than through a ceasefire. The rhetoric of the Prime Minister of Israel has been damaging, I think, and quite frankly, it's led to the innocent civilians that have been murdered and killed right now. What I'd love to see from the White House is a recognition that, one, Benjamin Netanyahu is not a great actor to work with in this conflict. He is not.
So as you can see, now this, like I said, this is a Democratic state rep in Michigan, and it's sort of like a social democrat situation. Now, he's going a little bit further than the average social democrat, but as you can see, he still lands on the same establishing talking points that somehow this is Netanyahu and not the state of Israel as a whole. So even with his advocacy for Palestinians, he still has this soft spot for establishment talking points. But let's listen to some more.
not somebody who I think has the best interest of not only the Israeli people, but the U.S. foreign policy broadly and at heart. He doesn't have that at heart. He's concerned that the moment this conflict ends, so too does his tenure as prime minister in Israel. Because ultimately the burden falls on him for failing to one, keep Israel safe, but two, for failing to bring back the hostages in a timely manner when there's been deals and offers made to bring these hostages back home for a ceasefire.
I'm curious to get your perspective on something that Congresswoman Debbie Dingell said this morning, that President Biden has nothing to fear in Michigan's primary. Do you think enough voters will vote uncommitted that President Biden may see himself potentially lose the primary?
Oh, I mean, look, I'm talking to many of my constituents who are, who are organizers of the Michigan campaign. And, I think the president will, it's no secret, will probably win the Democratic primary today. The message, though, is that a plurality of voters, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, Gen Z voters are coming together, African-American voters are coming together in a coalition to tell the president that, hey, we want to see you call for the ceasefire. We want to see our White House reflect the values that we know it should reflect. I think that's the bigger message today. I don't think the stated goal of the Listen to Michigan campaign or any of these campaigns was to see the president lose the primary.
Okay.
So you heard that directly from one of the people involved. That's not the goal of the Uncommitted campaign, for him to lose the White House. The goal is just to send a message. So, and you just heard it right there. Let's move on to the next item here. That's the one we just covered. The next item is this one here. This is Cornel West. This is an interesting one. So let's watch this video or this interview. This is also with Dana Bash of Cornel West talking about the Uncommitted campaign. Let's play it. This is Cornel West. It's interesting to hear.
News this morning on the Robert F. Kennedy campaign. A super PAC supporting him says they've gathered enough signatures to get him on the ballot in two pivotal battleground states, Arizona and Georgia. Those signatures still need to be validated and could face court challenges, but so far he's only confirmed to be on the ballot in one state, Utah. My next guest is another third-party candidate trying to get on as many ballots as he can. Professor Cornel West joins me now. Thank you so much for being here. Sir, I want to start with Michigan, which is voting today. Some Democrats who are frustrated with President Biden's response to the Israel-Gaza war, they're urging residents to vote uncommitted, effectively against the president. Now, yesterday he announced progress in a deal for a temporary ceasefire in exchange for a hostage release. Should that help, never mind what it means for the region, which is the most important, but just on the raw politics of it, should that help the president politically?
Well, we shall see. But I mean, part of the problem is we can't reduce what's going on in Gaza to some kind of electoral political strategy. I mean, we've seen the example of our dear brother, Aaron Bushnell, when he set himself on fire. And
now, you saw that shock to Dana Bash's system when he mentioned Aaron Bushnell. And for those that don't know, the legend of Aaron Bushnell, he's the young active airman that lit himself on fire to protest the genocide in Gaza. And corporate media has been trying their best not to talk about it as much. At first, they held off from talking about it at all for a long, long, long time. Then they had to address it. And he brings it up here, which is unsettling to Dana Bash, as you saw her reaction there. But I'll rewind it a little bit and let him continue.
With President Biden's response to the Israel-Gaza war, they're urging residents to vote uncommitted, effectively against the president. Now, yesterday he announced progress in a deal for a temporary ceasefire in exchange for a hostage release. Should that help, never mind what it means for the region, which is the most important, but just on the raw politics of it, should that help the president politically?
Well, we shall see. But I mean, part of the problem is we can't reduce what's going on in Gaza to some kind of electoral political strategy. I mean, we've seen the example of our dear brother, Aaron Bushnell. When he set himself on fire and killed himself, what was he saying? These are moral issues and moral causes. These are not just brands and strategies and tactics. And as you know, Sister Dana, so much of American politics is about strategy and tactic. These are deeply moral and spiritual issues having to do with arbitrary power being used. And when I hear Sister Rashida say, well, Biden is not hearing us, no, Biden is enabling the killing of us. That's what's taking place here. And so you can imagine it, my Arab brothers and sisters in Dearborn and other places are saying, we're not just pieces to be moved on a chessboard. These are our families. This is mama and daddy. This is grandmama and granddaddy. It reminds me in some ways of the rabbis who marched in the early 40s, led by the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And FDR wouldn't even come out of the White House. He sent Henry Wallace, and those rabbis were sitting there saying, look, massacres are taking place. War crimes are taking place. Crimes against humanity, genocide is taking place. What did the White House do in the early 40s? Nothing at all, hardly. Why? Because it was an electoral-political issue. The Jewish vote didn't mean X. The Jewish vote didn't mean Y. These are human beings, and America is enabling the killing of them. So it is now in 2024. Where is the space for truth, justice, love in a moment of electoral politics? And
This is where Cornel West flourishes. In a lecture style conversation, period. That's it. It does not translate into anything else other than his ability to go in these spaces. And because of his class, he understands there is a boundary, even to his quote unquote radical speech. There are boundaries to that. And he pushes the limit in corporate media's eyes, not in our eyes. This is not pushing the limit at all or radical at all, but he pushes the limit in their eyes. And he's allowed to do this as long as it's not a real challenge to power, like coming on here and saying they need to stop funding Israel forever. Israel needs to go ahead and give this land back to Palestine. You don't hear him saying nothing like that. Those are a bridge too far. So let's continue.
And barbarity, that's the question.
Professor West, what about the other side of the argument? Not that there's any appropriate side to the killing of innocent civilians. We should just say that flatly. But when it comes to when it comes to war and retaliatory war, which is what this is, for lots of reasons.
When it comes to war and retaliatory war, this is where Cornel West should say, this is not a retaliatory war. They've been occupying Gaza. They've been occupying Palestine for decades. This is not retaliatory. That should be the response. Let's see if it is.
The biggest is what Hamas did, the terror attack inside of Israel, but also currently the hostages who are still there. Do you think that there is, first of all, on the hostages, but second of all, just on Hamas, is there?
You see what I spoke about earlier, how corporate media will not allow Palestinian suffering or the telling of a Palestinian suffering without immediate injections of so-called Israeli equivalent suffering. No, the attack, the so-called attack, the military attack, it wasn't a terrorist attack. No, the military attack by the military arm of Hamas. Let's just continue.
Do you believe in the idea of eradicating a terrorist group like Hamas, which did such barbaric things to innocent civilians?
How come they have such a broad vocabulary when it comes to this so-called suffering of October 7th? But their adjective machine somehow loses power when it's time to discuss Palestinians. Oh, I send prayers to Palestinians, and then they have all these long list of adjectives for Israelis.
Well, one, I mean, you and I know that a Jewish life has exactly the same value as a Palestinian life. A Palestinian baby has the same value as a Jewish baby. The question is, how do you get at the roots of it? Anytime you kill an innocent person, that is a crime against humanity. Did Hamas commit war crimes? Absolutely. Murder is murder. But at the same time, you and I also know that the root of what we're talking about here is an ugly occupation,
Okay. At least he saved himself with that one there. What social democrats refuse to do, and what social democrats have made the deal with, is the police state and the military state. That's what social democrats are fine with making a deal with. So that's why he has this take on Hamas that he has. But let's let him continue with the second part. I'm going to rewind it just 5 seconds here.
The root of what we're talking about here is an ugly occupation.
So he at least says this part. He goes, this is the problem with social democracy, Democrats. These liberals, they good on one issue, and then they're just as bad on the same issue on a different point. Like he is right here. He's saying the right part, that is occupation. So if what you're saying about occupation is true, Cornel West, then how can what Hamas do be terrorist? That is illogical. You're saying on one hand there is an occupation happening in Palestine. Let's understand what an occupation is. That's a home invasion. So there's a home invasion, but I come and do something to the home invader, hit him over the head with a hammer. That's terrorism to you?
Is an embargo and siege. And
so even though he came on here and said a bunch of great stuff, you see the issue with social democrats and liberals here. It's never a full-throated support. It's never a full-throated solidarity.
Then we can call for a ceasefire. So in calling for a ceasefire, it ought to be on the way to get at the roots of the problem, which is the ending of an occupation, so that you can then have forms of resistance that don't have to take the form of killing innocent people. Now, I believe in just war. Combatants can kill combatants. I'm not like Martin Luther King. I'm not a pacifist. But
what? Combatants can kill combat? That's exactly what happened with Hamas on October 7th. That was a military exercise. I'm sorry, that was a military what's the right word? That was a military campaign on October 7th. This is the reason why the death toll numbers started to dwindle, because they had to accept that a lot of those deaths were from military targets. You see how what he's saying, this doesn't make any sense. And there's an occupation, so they can't resist militarily from an occupation, again, which is a home invasion. This guy, social democracy, it's not just him. It's not just Cornell. It's social democrats that do this.
But combatants must not kill civilians or innocent people, no matter who it is, IDF or Hamas. But the problem is, if you're going to call Hamas a terrorist group and the IDF is killing innocent people, they're terrorists too.
There you go. You see how he does something good and does something bad, and say something good and say something bad. This is the issue with social democrats and the allyship with social democrats. They're very unpredictable. You can't really strategize with somebody who's unpredictable, who's up and down like this. But this is a great point that he makes here. That This quite possibly might be the first time I've heard it on TV. I'm gonna let him say it again.
Occupation, so that you can then have forms of resistance that don't have to take the form of killing innocent people. Now, I believe in just war. Combatants can kill combatants. I'm not like Martin Luther King. I'm not a pacifist. But combatants must not kill civilians or innocent people, no matter who it is, IDF or Hamas. But the problem is, you're going to call Hamas a terrorist group, and the IDF is killing innocent people, they're terrorists too. If American soldiers kill innocent people, they're terrorists too. We have to be morally consistent in our language, in our deeds. And this is what I pull from Hebrew scripture. This is what I pull from following a Palestinian Jew named Jesus.
And the IDF argument, you heard Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday arguing wholeheartedly that the big difference is that Hamas went out and sought out civilians. What the IDF is doing is trying to get rid of Hamas. And
so the refugee camps. This is what's the right word? This is the right word. This is what Western chauvinist perspective that she has here. It's where you can clearly see that what Israel is telling you about trying to keep civilians alive is clearly a lie. But because they say it, Western chauvinist countries go, well, Israel said they're trying. Israel said they're trying. There's one Hamas person in the building, 1,000 patients, innocent patients. Israel bombs it, kills 1,000 patients and the Hamas person. What the United States go? They said they tried. It's not believable. It's not believable. It's simply not believable to have this stance about Israel.
And the civilians are unfortunately getting killed in the crossfire. I'm not equating the two in terms of life as a life, but the argument is
why are you defending the IDF at all? Why are you coming in interjecting this at all? You don't go when you have an pro-Israeli person come on and then they say some nonsense. You don't go, well, the people in Gaza say you guys are occupying them. You don't do that sort of defending. Truly despicable, our media personality. That's what they are. They're not journalists. Truly despicable. They're unabashed sort of prostitution of their dignity and integrity.
That Hamas sought out civilians and the IDF is not.
Well, I mean, the difference there would be historically over the last 75 years, we've got overwhelming evidence that the IDF has killed innocent people and is killing innocent children right now. And each one of those children are not a shield of a Hamas soldier. So that the language on the one hand goes in one direction, the action goes in another direction. But the crucial thing is we've got to keep the moral and spiritual issues at the center. And
that was his way of saying the IDF and Israel are some liars. That was his nice way of saying that.
That's one of the problems with American politics these days. It's all about money. It's all about status and spectacle. What about the human beings who are suffering, be they mass incarcerated in ghettos or barrios or poor whites, or be they in Gaza, or be they frightened in other parts of the world?
Let's turn to make a hard turn now to politics, since you mentioned it. We're talking about you as a candidate. You were running as an independent candidate, independent of the parties you were talking about. You're currently on the ballot in 3 states, Alaska, Oregon, South Carolina. You told
Alaska, Oregon, and South Carolina. All right, you know what? I'm just going to leave this guy alone, man. It's just gone. It's a lost cause. This guy's a lost cause. So let's just move on. I was gonna comment on it, but he is a fucking lost cause, bro. It's done for this guy. Let's go to Claire McCaskill. This is a former rep of Nick, RBN brother Nick. Let's see her take. And this is when the uncommitted count was only at 16,000, approaching 17,000. We all know it's already reached over 100,000. Let's see her take as it's growing.
But also, Chris, we have to remember, I mean, let's look at the Ann Arbor numbers. Joe Biden didn't win Ann Arbor. Bernie Sanders won Ann Arbor.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So some of these areas have never been Biden country.
Yeah,
they have been really many more people that were further left and didn't like the idea of a moderate carrying the flag of our party.
Yeah.
If you're the Democrat, if you're the elites.
So the super moderate, the one who's so moderate that she moved right in her last campaign to act like she was a Trumper for Trump, if you recall that. She's saying these people who came out and uncommitted in these uncommitted areas, because these are college towns. A lot of these towns are college towns. University of Michigan, for example. These are further left towns. They were never with a moderate.
The Democratic Party. If you're the Biden White House, how concerned are you really about this faction of uncommitted voters staying home in November?
Well, I think there's a danger on both sides here that people are going to stay home. I think you've got traditional Republicans that no way.
They're trying so hard to intertwine Trump in with this. It's so pitiful.
They will vote for Joe Biden. In no way they will vote for Donald Trump. So there's going to be some people that are going to hold their nose and vote. And then there's going to be people that just stay home. The question is, will the Biden campaign be able, and by the way, there are no elites in our party, Alex.
Yes, sorry.
No elites.
She said that earlier, and she corrected it 1 minute in. She asked this question in the beginning where she referred to the Democratic leadership as the elites. Your propaganda mind barely clicked on a minute after she said that shit to correct it.
Term doesn't exist, actually.
I know you didn't mean that.
That doesn't exist.
But the question is, can Biden draw the kind of contrast around some issues like guns and abortion and, frankly, autocracy and what Trump is saying he's going to do? I mean, he's going to tear up
Dictator on day one.
Dictator on day one.
And so the moderate in Claire McCaskill, she basically is saying, forget these young people, these
but also,
people
Chris,
of
we have to
color, all
remember,
these
I mean,
people
let's look at
who are pro-Palestinian. You need to go after moderates. So go after abortion, start going after gun rights, do all these other things. You're not getting these people. Astonishing. All right, let's move on to the next video. This one is the sister of Rashida Tlaib. This is the person, the director, the person who was actually running Listen to Michigan, the campaign, the uncommitted campaign. This is the top person who was running it, who happens to be Rashida Tlaib's sister.
First of all, I wonder what your reaction to tonight's turnout is. And did you send the message that you were hoping to send to President Biden?
I mean, we are just, overwhelmed by the fact that we were able to triple our margin of victory of the original 10,000 votes that we were hoping to leverage to send a clear and strong message to President Joe Biden and his administration and the Democratic Party that we needed a permanent ceasefire now to save as many Palestinian lives as possible.
You know, Layla, President Biden, as you know, in recent days has said that Israel's response in Gaza has been, and quoting him, over the top. He said just yesterday that he's hoping for a ceasefire by the end of this weekend. What more do you need to hear from him specifically to go from uncommitted to committed to voting for him? Or is the concern that all of this is lip service during an election year?
Yeah, we need more than just nice words and hope. We need a permanent ceasefire right now.
You know, you at different times with the New York Times, you had mentioned this.
Yeah,
and
right
you said the very bare minimum that Biden needs to do to get the vote is to completely overhaul America's relationship with Israel, demand a permanent end to hostilities, and end American military aid to Israel, at least as long as its war in Gaza drags on.
Now, this interview, let me just give you an update. You see down there at the bottom, the ticker, this is when the count for uncommitted was at 44,000. 43,732 will run up to 44,000. So that's when this interview took place. So clearly it went past the 20,000. Now it surpassed double the normal amount. They have no idea it's going to reach 100,000. And this is the interview that is taking place. She's mentioning the demands, and I'll rewind it just a little bit so you can hear again the list of demands.
Nice words and hope. We need a permanent ceasefire right now.
You know, you at different times with the New York Times, you had mentioned this, and you said that the very bare minimum that Biden needs to do to get the vote is to completely overhaul America's relationship with Israel, demand a permanent end to hostilities, and end American military aid to Israel, at least as long as its war in Gaza drags on. Do you think that he would likely try to meet those expectations, or are there some concessions electorally that you would see?
I think if Joe Biden wants to avoid alienating his core base and his core constituency, he will listen to the uncommitted vote now and realize that he is going to be at risk come November for essentially handing the White House over to Trump. And he's going to have to be accountable to that. We voted. Michiganders used their ballot box as a humanitarian vote, as a protest vote, to demand that our government and our president call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and end the military funding of our American taxpayer dollars, commit a genocide in 2024.
Help me follow this thread in terms of what would be the next frontier. Let's assume that he does not meet the expectations as you've laid out or what you have just described. Does that mean that the supporters of your particular uncommitted movement are they going to stay home? Will they vote for Donald Trump?
Well, what I can say is that the uncommitted voters are not going to be voting in a monolith. They are going to have to vote their conscience. There are going to be groups, voters within this movement that already feel deeply betrayed by Biden and his administration for the fact that Muslim Americans and Arab Americans have been directly affected by Israel's aggression and collective punishment of Palestinians. And not only that, as Democrats, we feel betrayed because why are we risking our democracy to align ourselves with someone like Netanyahu and his right-wing government?
You know, the idea, and you are correct to describe the absence of a monolith when you're talking about any voting bloc that people often will look to. I'll be curious to see what ultimately will be the decision of those voters voting their conscience, voting what they want.
You notice what she zeroed in on? That's how you know the person has been doing corporate propaganda for a long time. They know what to zero in on from the answer, because that's something you can't prepare for. You can't prepare for what your guess's answer going to be. But when you're a good propagandist, you know what to zero in on in seconds of what the person is saying. And what she zeroed in on was the monolith thing, because what she wants to zero in on is that all you jackasses that's voting, you guys are not a monolith because some of you are going to be coming home to vote for Joe Biden regardless. That's what she's trying to zero in on here. Let's listen to the rest of this.
I want to mention that President Biden just released a statement thanking Michigan, but did not mention the uncommitteds. What's your response?
I think that is negligent on behalf of the president to, once again, alienate the voices of his core constituency, largely who put him in the White House in 2020, because this community largely supported Biden based on the promises that he made during his campaign trail. And we know that Trump is not a friend to our community. And we know that he is not a friend to the anti-war, pro-ceasefire community. But right now, we are appealing to Joe Biden as our president to act now before he risks losing his core constituency come November.
But I want to focus on that. What does that mean to lose the core constituency? Does that mean that although you just said that
You see how she has to pull out of this young lady, Rashida Tlaib's sister. Let me get her actual name here. Is it on the screen? I don't see it on the screen. She has to pull out, well, what are you going to do if they don't? This reluctancy to answer that is a sign, is a trait of a social democrat, because they're not really trying to tear this shit down, and they're not really trying to tip their hand, or she's not really trying to tip their hand. They're actually just going to vote for him. But if it was somebody more radical, like an RBN, this is the first question I want to answer. Oh, we're not going to come out and vote for him. That's what's going to happen. If he doesn't change course, we hope that the 100,000 people will stay home. That should be your answer. That's the answer they need to hear. But because this is really a social democrat sort of project, one, that's not their strategy, and two, that's it. There's not their strategy. I don't need to give a second reason.
Your constituency knows that Donald Trump is not a friend to the causes that you describe. Does that mean that the couch is now the third party candidate?
That means that we need to save as many Palestinian Israeli lives as possible, and that
now she included the Israeli
this
lives.
Is a humanitarian vote. This is beyond politics. This is within the ceasefire movement, and we use our ballot box as a protest vote in order to save as many lives as possible, and to end this unchecked and unconditional funding that the United States provides to Israel to commit genocide using American taxpayer dollars.
The signal and the message that's being sent to President Biden, I do wonder if, knowing that he has not mentioned the constituency of Uncommitted, whether the message has been received. But what about Donald Trump, who obviously is also looking at this, wondering if this will inure to his benefit at this point in time?
I don't have that much
The
faith that she's gonna
policies
answer
of
this
Donald Trump
question
that he has professed and articulated,
Democrat,
are those an improvement to what the Biden administration is doing now?
Like I said, I can't answer to every voter who voted uncommitted today, but what I can say is we use the primary as a way to tell Joe Biden and his administration what we needed right now. We are not focused right now what's going to happen in November, but what we do know is that voters are going to vote their conscience. And I don't know if voters will be able to pull their support behind a president that is complicit in a genocide. And as far as Trump, I really, I can't answer to every uncommitted voter. But what I do know is that we don't expect our voters in Michigan to stay at home. We do expect and we encourage our voters to come out and vote. And there are plenty of important races that are going to be taking place in November besides the presidential election.
Very true. Thank you so much. Clearly,
what social democrats don't understand, you can make this such a better, more stronger appeal argument if you would just come off of this patty cake nice shit that you want to still do with the establishment and say what you want to say. No, we don't care if Trump gets in office. What's the difference, tangible difference to us? A ban or a genocide? What's the difference? Social democrats don't want to say that. But anyway, let's move on to the next part here, and you can see where Williamson gets 15,000 votes here, and Phillips is at 14,000, as you can see. Uncommitted 65,000. So I can't remember the final number that they got. Yeah. All right, so let's listen to this part here. This is another important conversation you want to break down. Case Study QB just had over the last several days, just been pulling all of these clips about Uncommitted because the primary happened yesterday.
What would have been more concerning is if these voters voted for Dean Phillips. Now, if these voters had voted for Dean Phillips, there would be a fire alarm inside the White House right now, and everybody would be out of that building, and they'd be out in the campaign making this thing.
So this is what's called spin. This is a Democratic strategist. A Democratic strategist understands, even if they're not currently working for a Democrat as a strategist or working in that capacity in that manner, at any point, they can be called up out of the minor leagues. So knowing this is the reason why Democratic strategists, don't matter if they're in their 5th year as a Democratic strategist or a 5th year, they're always using this, they always stand in line with the talking points because they never know when they're going to be pulled off the bench and pulled back into the game. Because he was part of a administration, I think the Obama administration, and now he's just floating around giving his opinions. But the opinions always stay in lockstep with the establishment. And this one is not any different of what he's saying right here. I'll rewind it and let it play again with that prefix.
What would have been more concerning is if these voters voted for Dean Phillips. Now, if these voters had voted for Dean Phillips, there would be a fire alarm inside the White House.
So if the same amount of people voted for Dean Phillips, now it would be a fire alarm. Who believe? Let's let him just finish
right now, and everybody would be out of that building, and they'd be out in the campaign making this thing happen.
And look, I'll let you jump in definitely, but Donald Trump right now is battling back Nikki Haley, by 20, 30 points. Joe Biden is still winning by a very comfortable margin, and to Jamal's point, Dean Phillips, the guy who's actually running against him, can't get beyond 5%.
It is amazing that these Negroes, and I'm going to say Negroes because that's what Abby Martin is being right now, a Negro servant. Because to pretend and to have this assessment of the Democratic primary when you know damn well that the Democratic primary is rigged, the DNC shut down the primary, you know this. There is no debate, but you want to pretend like, what good is it to boast about a win that was handed to you? How are you standing on as if that's a good thing, as if this proves some sort of strength when you rigged your win? The win has been rigged. So to compare the Democrats' rigged primary to the Republican primary where Donald Trump is demolishing Haley fair and square is just preposterous and disingenuous to their audience.
Against him can't get beyond 5%.
Right, and that's not going to change. And to Jamal saying this is a low risk protest, it is. Look, I think this is not exactly a profile encourage when you're encouraging people to go out and vote uncommitted in a primary. Now, if they really wanted to send the message to Joe Biden, they would take this all the way through November and say that we're going to do a protest vote or sit on the couch in November. They're not going to do that. And she mentioned that in her conversation with Laura. But if
so, the Republican strategist just called all of y'all out. She said, you guys are fucking bullshitting here. You guys are fucking voting uncommitted when that shit don't matter at all. Show me you got backbone and do it in November. And she's spot on. This is one of the times I absolutely agree with this particular point from this Republican strategist. Now, she's going to go on and say some nonsense after this, but I do agree with this point. Prove that you're standing with the Palestinians in November.
If they were to carry this through November, this would be a huge concern for Joe Biden. Look, those numbers we're seeing right now, 46,000 Michigan people voted uncommitted. That's a significant number. In the 2020 election, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by around 150,000. In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump by around 10,000. So 10,000 votes could sway the difference. And if these uncommitted voters keep this passion going through to November, it could be a huge warning sign and a big problem for Joe Biden. I'm not certain they're going to do so, but we heard also from Debbie Dingell, Congresswoman from Michigan earlier. She has been sounding the alarm to this administration for quite some time. We have to address the situation. The air Arab Muslim community in Michigan is crying out for this. And the younger community in Michigan is doing so as well. And if he is going to really address this situation, he needs to do something much more serious than throwing out a possibility of a ceasefire in an ice cream shop. It must be much more organized, and it has to include a ceasefire and releasing the hostages.
Yeah, I mean, what happens on the ground is incredibly consequential. Worth noting, though, Debbie Dingell has been sounding the alarm even before this. So it could be issues compounded on one another. Everyone stick around.
So let's move to
What would have been
the next
more concerning is if these voters voted for Dean Phillips.
Just
Now, if these voters have
if they voted for Dean Phillips, that would set off fucking just making shit up, man. Anyway, let's go to, there's a little shorter video, more interview with Nina Turner. She goes, I think is this Newsmax or News Nation? Let's listen to what she says.
You tweeted out earlier the following. You said, Michigan, a vote for Uncommitted is not a vote for Trump. It's a vote for peace, humanity, empathy, and justice. Pass that on. In other words, pass that message on. There's a Guardian article. We'll put this headline up as well. The Michigan governor says not voting for Biden over the Gaza war, quote, supports a second Trump term. So let's start there. Tell us, what's this all about?
Yeah, well, the Michigan governor is wrong about that. This is a primary, Connell, and that's important for people to understand. This is not Trump versus Biden. This is Biden in a Democratic primary. And the organizers of the Uncommitted are really trying to send the president, as you highlighted, a message about standing up for the humanity of the people, the men, the women, the children in Gaza. And we also know there were some murders of Palestinians also in the West Bank. None of these people, and I was just on the ground, I was just in Dearborn a couple of days ago, and no one is jumping up and down to say that they want to see Donald J. Trump become president again. What they are saying to the current president is that you must call for a permanent ceasefire and call for it right now, because not only are people dying, there are people who are alive right now who are facing famine. There have been babies who have been born, you know, in the Gaza, who all they've ever known is what is happening now if they live. I mean, there's some people who've been born, some babies, excuse me, who've been born and they died right away. So where's the humanity for the people of the Gaza?
Yeah, and it's
you tweeted out earlier the following. You said, Michigan, a vote for Uncommitted.
White supremacy sort of world framing that because Western chauvinist countries sort of who happen to be these old historical colonial powers, France, United States, Britain, because of those times when they, you know, were ruling as such, they still have the levers of power in places like the ICJ, in places like the UN, the United States vetoing several ceasefires. Hopefully this tide is turning though with this with BRICS and such, but let's continue with the next item here, because now I didn't get a chance to play it. Do I have that video? Let me see if I have it, because I was going to cover this before, and you know what, I'm not even going to try to find it. But there was a guy who was saying how if Biden chose to do a ceasefire, he's actually going to turn off his base. He was making a point to say it's crazy the framing that we keep hearing as if a ceasefire is going to solve all his problems. But if you ceasefire, then people are on the other side. But that is simply not true. There's something like 80% of Democrats who support a ceasefire and half of Republicans. And that's to the point of this tweet from Cori Bush. The majority of voters in the world all agree we need a ceasefire. And this is just a poll indicating those numbers. And I spoke to it. I said 80% of Democrats. The exact number is 77% of Democrats. So rounding up 80%, 70% of independents, and 56% of Republicans. So if somebody tells you, well, if we do a ceasefire, then he's going to lose the other side. No, it's not. 80% of every percent of Democrats want it, 70% of independents, and 60% of Republicans. So don't let anybody, and here's a receipt on that. Voters continue to support the U.S. calling for a permanent ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza. And that is the poll. You can screenshot that if you're watching. Here's another one. Now, this is where it hit the 100 mark, and it's at 101,000. 101,000, 13%. This is when it was at, is this 90%? I can't tell. It's real small in that graphic there. Let's move to the next item here. Now, this is a Democratic rep who's now reacting to the number being 100,000. So we've seen a lot of conversation and reaction as the count is going on, when it's at 20,000, when it's at 40,000, when it's at 50,000. Now let's see the reaction when it's at 100,000, because now it's undeniable.
On the heels of this Michigan primary, this is a huge issue. This was a huge issue for Democrats. More than 100,000 voting uncommitted. That is significantly more than we have seen in the past in Michigan primary. Does that make you nervous for President Biden?
No, I think that it's still early. I think that the people don't know. I wish folks knew what I know when I know how hard he's working behind the scenes. Diplomacy is hard. And just having the status quo, just having a ceasefire and going back to what was is not good enough for President Biden. What President Biden wants to do is to have a different Middle East where you have a two-state solution where the people of Israel can live in peace and the people, the Palestinians, can live in peace and have their own governing boards. That's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes hard work. And I think that that's what he's trying to accomplish. And I think that's what the people of Michigan really want. They don't want occupation in Gaza. They want to have an independent state side by side. That's hard work. It's not a quick fix. And that's what the Biden administration is not trying to just do a quick fix. They're trying to make a change that will benefit both the people of Palestine, the Palestinians, as well as the Israelis.
Congressman Greg Meeks, thank you so much for coming in today.
So Greg Meeks wants us to believe the reason we have 30,000 dead bodies is because it's complicated to get shit done. That's what he wants us to believe. We can't create this one-state solution overnight. This hasn't been going on just for several months, Congressman Meeks. This has actually been going on for decades through several presidents. So if you think that the situation in Palestine, occupied Palestine, is going to be negotiated during an 8-year period or a 4-year period of a presidency, it's not. It should have happened over decades. But you can't want a two-state solution and at the same time fund the people who are committing a genocide, who is committing an apartheid state. That's what you can't do, because you're putting your eggs in a basket to keep this status quo going, but you're projecting that you want the status quo to go away. Doesn't work that way. Let's continue with the next video here. We're just going down the line. Listen to this. Listen to this. This is a very short one. So this is CNN, who sees what's happening in Michigan, the uncommitted vote, and they're frustrated. Damn, what else can we do? Like, what's wrong with these young people? What's wrong with these guys? What else do you want? We're doing this, we're doing that. So he is frustrated that young people aren't falling in line because Joe Biden did so much for them. And I guess he listed it. Let's listen to what he lists here.
But it was also the college counties, like around Ann Arbor, that you had high numbers of people voting uncommitted. What can President Biden do in terms of outreach to younger voters that he hasn't done already? I mean, he's already forgiven all the student debt that he can. He's already showing up on Seth Meyers and TikTok. How does he reach the younger crowd? But it was also the college counties, like around Ann Arbor, that you had.
Isn't that insulting? How do we reach young people? $35 minimum wage, $17-20 trillion investment in climate, money out of politics, in the genocide, wipe out all student debt. But he says he's already been on Seth Meyers and he's on TikTok. Is that serious?
At high numbers of people voting uncommitted, what can President Biden do in terms of outreach to younger voters that he hasn't done already? I mean, he's already forgiven all the student debt that he can. He's
already forgiving all the student debt that he can. You have to include that he can. You know what that amount of student debt is? It's something like not even 5% of what needs to be canceled.
He's already showing up on Seth Meyers and TikTok.
He's showing up on Seth Meyers and TikTok. So why don't you come vote for Genocide Joe? What is this?
How does he reach the younger crowd? But it was also the college count.
Anyway, I let it loop twice. Let's move to the next thing. That is astonishing to me. Let's listen to Pramila Jayapal talk about the protest vote as it's happening yesterday. Let's listen to her. This is on MSNBC.
When 74% of Democrats in Michigan support a ceasefire, yet President Biden is not hearing us. This is the way we can use our democracy to say, listen to Michigan, listen to the families right now that have been directly impacted, but also listen to the majority of Americans who are saying enough. No more wars, no more using our dollars to fund a genocide.
But Congresswoman Tlaib wasn't alone among voters using their vote as their voice in today's primary.
I want President Biden to take us seriously, talk about the subject more seriously.
I'm hoping that it will tell the Democratic Party that they are making terrible decisions.
I voted uncommitted to let Joe Biden know that we do not support genocide.
I'm not so happy with how our government is running the foreign policies. Just the fact that over 10,000 children have died in Gaza. It's unnecessary and needs to be stopped. There should be a ceasefire.
No candidate will receive our votes if they continue to support genocide in Gaza.
Joining me now is former Michigan Congressman Andy Levin and Dana Williams, Dean of the Graduate School and Professor of African American Literature at Howard University. Thank you both for being here. I would normally do ladies first, but I do want to go to you first, Andy Levin. Talk about this protest vote. How large do you expect it to be? And what is the message that's being sent to President Biden? Is it not getting these votes in November or something else?
Hi, Joy. Well, it's great to be with you. The message is that we need this horrible war to end right now. People here are so upset about it. Yes, Arab Americans, Muslims more broadly, people of color, young people, a lot of the president's base, we're just beside ourselves here at the carnage in Gaza. It has to end, and that's the message they're sending. There are over 8 months, Joy, between February 27th and November 5th. So we're not talking about November 5th now, but I'm very worried about November 5th if he doesn't change course. So this is a huge message to him to change course, because you cannot get reelected as president of the United States without winning Michigan. And you can't win Michigan with this many of your base members upset.
And very quickly, what do you guys expect? Do you have an estimate? Because I know 10,000 votes was the goal, but there have been protest votes in every primary. It happens all the time. What would be considered victory for you all?
I think 10,000 votes is great. I think we're now expecting to get at least one uncommitted delegate to the.
They're looking at right now 3 uncommitted delegates. So in any county in Michigan, if you reach 15%, you get a delegate, and there's 3 either counties or regions. I forget how they use the word they use to label it, county, regions, districts, one of those, where it has reached 15%. One of which is where Dearborn, the city of Dearborn, is located, and then it's the city right next, or the district right next to Dearborn. that has a higher percentage. Both of those, one is like at 17 point something percent, and the other one's at 18%. And then there's another one that's in the 15. So there's three right now that it could, three delegates that the uncommitted could receive right now. Or last time I checked is how I should phrase it.
To the convention, and I think there may be more than that in Michigan's rules. If you get 15% of the vote in a congressional district, you get one delegate. So I think it's going to be a very successful night tonight. I'll tell you what, Joy, my biggest fear is not that so many people come out and President Biden, it's seen as like, oh my gosh, so many people are voting uncommitted. My fear is that people stay home. And he doesn't get the message because I don't think he can win in November here unless he changes course.
So let's talk about this because Professor Williams, there's two pieces of what you have to do to win Michigan. You need a robust vote among the air.
So this young lady comes on to talk about polling she did through Howard University in Michigan about the Black vote, and it's specifically about the Black vote. And it's just a lot of information that they gathered from this polling. And I actually briefly covered this polling a couple of days ago, part of another segment. But let's listen to what she says here.
The Arab American community, it's about 100,000 people, but also the African American community. You're talking about you really need Detroit to come out, right? So let's talk about this. The Howard University, you all did something through impact research, a poll that talked about what Black voters think. What did you find in terms of the feelings about President Biden and Donald Trump?
We're looking at all Black voters, which is unique in and of itself. So it gives us the opportunity really to do an analysis at a really more intentional and complex level. So what we found, interestingly enough, was that the contemporary polls don't bear out exactly what we bear out in terms of like where the support is. Some of the things, broad strokes, are absolutely true. There are some instances where Black women are still the stronghold. Black women are committed to the Democratic Party. But what we're also seeing is that Democratic voters are far more liberal if they are Black. And it doesn't matter what part of the state that they're in. So their concerns have shifted a little bit. And we ask them questions like, over the last 5 years, how have your politics shifted? And overwhelmingly, they've
shifted to the left.
That's right.
Let's go through some of these numbers really quickly. Joe Biden getting in this poll of Michigan, Black Michigan voters, 49% of the vote. Trump seemed high to me at 26%. Did that surprise you? And 9% for Kennedy.
It did, but I think there are a number of reasons that we can begin to think about that. It's a little bit higher in Michigan than it was when we did the national poll, which will focus on Super Tuesday coming forward. But those numbers.
I'm going to go back to that graphic there. 1 second here. This graphic. Black Michigan voters, Joe Biden, 49%, Donald Trump, 26%, RFK, 9%, Marianne Williamson, 7%, and the guy who's Black and talks about racism as the cornerstone of his fucking politics, comes in at 3% with Black voters. Fuck out of here. 2% higher than Nikki Haley. Jill Stein, 1%. Dean Phillips, 1%. And Jill Stein got to get that number up. Jill Stein can't be in polling at 1%. With the voters, but Black voters. But let's see.
That surprised you, and 9% for Kennedy.
It did, but I think there are a number of reasons that we can begin to think about that. It's a little bit higher in Michigan than it was when we did the national poll, which will focus on Super Tuesday coming forward. But those numbers vary based on religious affiliation, based on the issues that they identify with. So if you're asking folks who identify more with threats to democracy, the numbers shift just a little bit. We were a little bit concerned.
That it's that high. The other piece is that Black Michigan voters, reasons that you wouldn't vote, don't like the candidates, don't think it matters, don't think it changes anything, and what would actually...
And that is the same reasons everybody, not just Black voters. Now, this lady is a person who works for Howard, and it was specifically about Black voters. But look at this. 34% don't like the candidate. 34% don't think that it matters. And 26% think their vote changes, don't think their vote changes anything. All of these reasons are great reasons. All of these reasons we've all felt at some point, whether you're black or not. And what RBN is saying, speaking to this, is that nothing will change. Your vote doesn't matter, and these candidates are all the same. So why are you wasting so much time and energy on that? We don't say completely divest from electoral politics. We say participate in electoral politics by way of independent and third parties. And you should think about elections, very minimal. The rest of it is community work. The rest of it is providing material goods and services to the community.
To get you to vote, which I thought was really fascinating. 18% saying, seeing that my vote will change my life for the better. That does seem to be an important thing.
It is, because we are also trying to understand why people are making certain decisions. Our big thing really is getting people out to vote. It's nonpartisan, so we really want to know what would make a difference and where are we failing with messaging, because part of what we want to be able to do at Howard.
Where are we failing with messaging? That lets you know this black face is doing the same thing that a white face would do. Trying to gain information about a target audience that you can use to manipulate them without delivering nothing. That's what messaging means.
Howard, and with this public opinion initiative, very especially, is to make sure that we know that our voices are being heard.
And we've got last one, the concerns about Biden voters' age. It did show up.
Yes.
With Trump, it's morals, ethics, and his track record.
Yeah, I think that's, an obvious one. We're all very endeared to our elders in every way, but the reality is people are concerned about the age. What we didn't show as much as the concern about like the replacement. So I think black folks are still very comfortable with Kamala Harris.
And last question, did Gaza come up in the poll?
It didn't as much as we imagined that it would. We did ask the question very explicitly. We know that there are affinity groups and that black folks relate very specifically to to Arab Americans in Michigan. But the biggest number still for black folks were the economy, economy and jobs, which suggested that there's still a messaging problem because it's a strong economy.
Yeah.
And the unemployment rate is high. So
it still suggests that there's a messaging problem, even though my rent is high. Food prices are high, but it's a messaging problem. You see the issue here? Pollsters are just gaining information for people, for the establishment to use to manipulate you, not at all to deliver on what you want or need. And just quick note, that is what it looks like in Arizona. Registered voters. Biden is in a fucking heap of trouble. I'm going to skip up here to some other items here. Now, I just want to show you a couple of reaction here. Where am I? This one. This one here I'll read. This is from Saba. I think this is the lady, the young college student that came on, that went viral for being on CNN. And then she came on with Nick in Rome on a stream. This is her, Saba. And let's read what she says. Over 100,000 uncommitted vote on the Democratic ballot and over 33,000 on the Republican. So understand, there was 33,000 who voted uncommitted in Republicans. Thank you, Michigan. As a Palestinian, thank you. Seeing these numbers is a indescribable feeling. You stood up for us. The fight just started. See you in November, Joe, or not. And it's just showing a meme of Kamala Harris saying, we did it. We just did it, Joe. We got 100 uncommitted votes. It's a play on the picture she did before. And then here is Professor Zankas here, or Zankas. And he says 100,000 uncommitted votes in Michigan, 100,000 Democrats standing against a president who for 4 months has given Israel every weapon they've asked for as they've buried thousands of children under rubble. So that was his reaction. All right, just a couple of more. Here is a comparison. This is Nina Turner's tweet. This is a comparison of past years where there was an uncommitted vote. So let's look at the last couple of years, last couple of cycles here with this tweet with Nina Turner. Michigan, 2024. I'm starting from the top. Okay, Michigan, 2012 uncommitted, 20,833. That's the one they keep referring to in video. I think when the upcoming video is going to show that. 2016, 21,601. 2020, 19,106. And then 2024, 100,000. So if you were to take out 20,000, which is the norm for various reasons, you got to attribute at least 80,000 votes to uncommitted above the normal threshold that you would see for this. So that is the numbers. Now let's go to this next part. Oops, I want to actually play this video first. Now let's talk about specific counties so we can see the breakdown, because in Dearborn, I think Dearborn is the only one, or maybe it's Wayne County, where there was more votes for uncommitted than there were for Joe Biden. Let's listen to this short snippet that talks about it.
This is what Joe Biden received. Again, forgive me, 1,141 votes. Dean Phillips, 54 votes. And uncommitted, make sure I get this right, 3,703 votes. So that's a wow. If you look at it this way, this is 23%. And this is 75%. And so this is just the city of Dearborn, but that is where the biggest pocket of the Muslim American, the Arab American population. This is a place President Biden carried big time in 2020. This is key to his chances of defeating Donald Trump in Michigan again. This is what Joe Biden received.
No, they cut it off, but I'm going to go back just to the graphic here. Biden, Phillips, uncommitted. Now, they flipped the number. Oh, no, that's right. Yeah, because the wording, that's where I'm looking at. It says uncommitted with Dean Phillips' face, and it says Dean Phillips with the blanked out. So it says Dean Phillips here, but this is uncommitted, and it says uncommitted here, but this is Dean Phillips. Just wanted to clarify that part there. And let's go to another part that I have, and that is that this is one of the last videos, and it's uncommitted on the ground. Bookmark, and I got a couple of other items to show you, but let's listen to this one.
Racina's Omar Jimenez is in Dearborn, Michigan, where actually in Dearborn proper, uncommitted got more votes than President Biden.
That's right. I mean, look, here in Dearborn, Dearborn's home to one of the largest Arab American communities in the country. And the Vote Uncommitted movement was led by Arab American activists over their disagreement with how President Biden is handling the Israel-Hamas war. And as you mentioned, yes, when you look at unofficial results coming from the city of Dearborn, uncommitted beat Joe Biden 56% to 40%. Now, that's within a total of 11,000 votes. But when you expand that data countywide, here, that number is over 25,000. And when you look statewide, over 100,000 people voted uncommitted. Now, President Biden still did win this primary by a large margin, but when you look at the margin that he won Michigan by in 2020, that was around 150,000. So obviously a sizable margin there. And the goal of those that were leading this uncommitted movement was to send a message that President Biden needs to be doing more to push towards a permanent ceasefire. And you read some of the senior campaign advisor reaction we're getting in, saying that they share the goal of many who voted uncommitted to work toward a lasting and just peace. But moving forward, obviously, this is a message that was sent. On the Republican side.
Yeah. All right. There was a lot to cover for the uncommitted. I still have the return of Marianne Williamson, which is a lot shorter. I did want to show this video, though. It can still, I guess, go under what we're talking about now. But this video is Wolf Blitzer talking about vote shaming. So it's vote shaming around Palestine. So that's the reason why it's still about the same topic. But this is, like I said, this is Wolf Blitzer talking about vote shaming. So let's see what he says here.
We will see. Ashley, as you know, some Biden surrogates are facing some blowback right now for spreading a campaign, this campaign talking point, and specifically a vote cast against Joe Biden is a vote for Donald Trump. That's the quote. Is that an effective messaging strategy right now?
That wouldn't be the message I was using right now. I think that the vote that you're voting for right now is not necessarily a vote against President for Donald Trump in this primary. I will say, though, that if you don't vote for Joe Biden in the general election and you sit out, I wouldn't necessarily use that message right now because it feels that you are not taking the concern of why people are expressing this uncommitted vote to heart and really engaging with the dialogue to see if we can move forward. Because ultimately, the goal for uncommitted voters, the goal for people supporting Joe Biden and Joe Biden himself is that we want people to be safe in Palestine and we want the hostages to come home and we want Israel to be safe. I think those are the common grounds that are across all three of those constituencies. We just have to figure out a way to execute that plan.
So if you didn't grasp that, I'm going to play it one more time. Wolf Blitzer asked the question, can Trump derangement syndrome, the Trump derangement syndrome strategy, can that be used in this instance? Can we call the people who are refusing to vote for Joe Biden over Palestine, can we call them, can we say that their vote is a vote for Trump? Can we say that in this context? And luckily they have a, I don't know if it's because they have a black strategist, but at least a strategist with a little bit of just sense here to say, probably wouldn't use that one in this situation.
We will see. Ashley, as you know, some Biden surrogates are facing some blowback right now for spreading a campaign, this campaign talking point, and specifically a vote cast against Joe Biden is a vote for Donald Trump. That's the quote. Is that an effective messaging strategy right now?
That wouldn't be the message I was using right now. I think that the vote that you're voting for right now is not necessarily a vote against President for Donald Trump in this primary. I will say, though, that if you don't vote for Joe Biden in the general election and you sit out, it does advantage Donald Trump. So I wouldn't necessarily use that message right now because it feels that you are not taking the concern of why people are expressing this uncommitted vote to heart and really engaging with the dialogue to see if we can move forward. Because ultimately, the goal for uncommitted voters, the goal for people.
Now, what she's doing, understand, you might be thinking, oh, she's so nice. She's so compassionate. No, she understands the optics because she doesn't agree with the logic. You heard her say, now, if you do this in November, you are advantaging Trump. So she agrees with the logic. She just doesn't agree that this is a good time to use, Trump derangement as a strategy. And she rightly explains because it doesn't feel like you're being sensitive to those people. So that is a spot on, not spot on, but that is a great breakdown that she makes here. All right, so let's get to some of the other items that I wanted to cover today, and largely that is this. Now, what I'm going to do, Marianne Williamson is back, and here's the headline right here. This is the next thing I'm going to cover, everybody. Do I have a banner for this here? I do not. But this is the return of Marianne Williamson. Williamson. Okay, I think that's it. All right, so let me read a couple of super chats, and then we will get to this next topic. And of course, this topic of the return cannot go without videos from Kyle and Crystal. So we're going to be examining the headline of the return of Marianne, but then we'll talk with Kyle and Crystal a bit about it. But before we do that, let's go over super chats. And we got 8 super chats. Let's go through them now. This one here from Suburban Lab, new member to the RBN community on YouTube. Welcome. Thank you for joining the RBN community. Make sure you hit that like button. Get us to 800. Let's read the next super chat here. This one from friend of the show, Colin from the Indie Network. Arab Americans in Dearborn have been calling for a ceasefire since at least 2021. I don't know what Blair is talking about. If you think back to the time when, what was it, Bacarly Sailors was saying something about there was a ceasefire back before October 7th. But yeah, thank you for that, Colin. Next super chat, this one from John Freeze. I think there's a couple. Yeah, this one and another one. The liberal professional managerial class, that's what PMC stands for, care more about their thoughts and emotions than the actual math of people killed and the thoughts and emotions of Palestinians. Yes, they center themselves, even in somebody else's struggle. How do I feel about their struggle? How do I how am I a savior to these people? Is always through that lens that you're speaking to. So let's get to the next one from John Freeze. This one, I think our talking point needs to be, quote, let's just do the math when it comes to the number of people killed and amount of land stole. That's a good way. That's a good way to parse the differences. And this one, this is Landrew showing us some love yet again, always showing us some love. Everybody in the chat, shout out, give Landrew some love for this $100 super chat. Will we be able to buy tickets to the war crime trial for Genocide Joe at the Hog? And I think you're spelling genocide because Twitter is not allowing it for some people to type certain words. Not Twitter, I'm sorry, YouTube chat. So I believe that's the reason why you typed the genocide that way. It's not going to be televised. I don't think it's going to be televised. It should. But thank you, Landrew, for that generous super chat. This one from Team Arca. Thank you for this super sticker. This one, Kevin Edgar. New member, Kevin Edgar. Welcome aboard. This one, another new member. Is that Melly 3-piece? Melly 3-piece. 1 month membership. Welcome to the family, everybody that joined. And last but not least, I'll shout out our website. Go to our website, scrolling right there at the bottom, revolutionaryblackoutnetwork.com. If you want to know more details about the group, if you want to see about our outreach, we have an entire section dedicated to our community outreach. We also have an entire section dedicated to our chapters. So if you want to learn more about that and what we want to do with our chapters, you can check that out. Lots of other information there on our website too. If you want to join our mailing list to know when we go live, I'm one of the ones, I don't really have a set schedule. I have a set days, but the time I start could vary just depending on what's happening in my personal life, with my family life. But join our Substack so you're always on top of clips. Our editor's back, and she's been cranking out those clips at least 4 a day. Great graphics, great clips. Make sure you get on our Substack so you get notifications for that. The other thing is our contact. info@revblacknetwork.com. And if you need to contact us. And then the best way to support us is through Patreon. We have many different memberships, but our lowest is $3. So make sure you, if you're able to, contribute. And here is our Patreon shout out, and then we get back to the stories. Patreon shout out is about 45 seconds. It's a list of everybody. You may see your name. You're watching right now. You're going to see your name if you're a Patreon subscriber. Let's give it 45 seconds. Love it. I think Susan Sarandon has a special plan. Wait to the end when you see Susan Sarandon's plan. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. That's Susan Sarandon. She contributes at $100. You can create your own plan. She created her own. But thank you, all of our Patreons. And now let's get to, again, I thought we were done with Marianne Williamson, and I was never able to get to this clip where I wanted to, because this is where Kyle and Crystal, the two main supporters, main pushers of Marianne Williamson, had to come out and say, make a comment about her dropping out of the race. So we're going to cover that and then get to the actual announcement video. But just to read the headline from the Hill, just in, author Marianne Williamson announced that she is unsuspending her presidential campaign, claiming American voters are watching a car crash in slow motion with the current candidates. Maybe she got back in because of Cornel West imploding. Maybe that's it. We'll listen to her announcement video in just a second. I do want to start with this video. It's about 7 minutes long with Beyonce and Jay-Z, also are better known as Kyle and Crystal Kalinsky.
Campaign over.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Big news. Marianne Williamson. Campaign over.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
Officially suspended. I mean, I just have to say, I have nothing for love for Marianne as a human being, for the courage that she showed at a time when no one else was willing to step out, at the incoming that she has taken. So, I mean, listen, I can nitpick about this or that, or, issues that I would have approached. I think she deserves all of the respect and admiration in the world.
I can nitpick about stuff like Palestine, but who cares?
Being willing to take this on. I think she has exposed what an anti-democratic shambles the Democratic Party is. I mean,
she exposed that because we have video of us and many people telling her that's exactly what was going on. But we want to attribute the the expose of the Democrats to Marianne Williamson. That is quite laughable.
I mean, it's just from the jump, collaborating with their media organs, making sure she didn't get a good fair hearing, that people had no idea she was even running, that, there were states where they just decided we're just not even going to have a primary. We're just going to anoint Joe Biden. So Florida. Kudos to her for putting herself out there and doing everything she possibly could to give Democratic voters and the American people a choice, especially, Kyle, at a time when how many videos are we seeing on a daily basis now of Joe Biden completely unable to formulate a basic thought, or telling stories about foreign leaders that died decades ago, thinking that they're still alive and well, or not able to even find the word Hamas in order to explain his response on a potential ceasefire. It's just, when you look at this, you're like, what the hell are we doing? And so, just absolute kudos to her at this point for having had the courage to at least give it a shot.
So just a few things to point out real quick.
Yeah.
She and her campaign were blocked from getting voter data in various states after already paying for it.
That's right.
And then they refused to give any sort of refund after the fact. She was blocked from talking to various college Democrat groups in various states. As you alluded to, there were 4 so far Democratic primaries where they canceled it up front. In one instance in Florida, everybody went. It was Dean Phillips, Marianne, Williamson, Cenk Uygur went to go sign up on a certain day, and they go, "Oh, sorry, the date passed." They're like, "What are you talking about? The date is in like a week from now."
Right.
And they're like, "No, but we changed it without telling anybody."
Right.
And so now you can't get on the ballot. So these are very, very anti-democratic moves. There's a lot to criticize there. But beyond that, the biggest factor to me, and I think there's legitimate criticisms of her and her campaign. There's certainly things you could point out, like, hey, you could have done this better or that better. But to me, the biggest factor was, I always say this about the media. The difference between the media loving you and hating you, it's a big deal, but it's not that big of a deal, because as long as you're getting some noise around your campaign, it can spark a backlash effect where people start to love you, even if the media is shitting on you 24/7.
Yeah.
In the case of Marianne, what I feared the most is what happened, which is total indifference.
What he feared the
Wall of
most.
indifference. They pretend like you don't exist. And in a scenario like that, it's pretty much
couldn't
impossible
foresee that?
to break through.
That's right.
So after watching this
Didn't foresee that,
campaign,
okay.
my takeaway from it, and I've said this on my show as well, is that I fear that in order for a lefty to actually win, it needs to be either somebody who's super undeniable, like Bernie Sanders, who was a senator for 312 years before he ran.
He didn't
because
win.
it's like, he's a senator. What are you going to do? He's just serious in the political game, whether or not you want to acknowledge it. I think they could even disregard and disrespect Congress people. That's what happened with Dean Phillips. They're like, you're a peon. You're nobody. Get out of here. You would either need a senator or you would need an A-list celebrity, maybe a B-list celebrity you can get away with, in order to break through. So if somebody like Jon Stewart ran, the media wouldn't be able to keep the cameras off of Jon Stewart because he's super entertaining. He already has that gravitas and charisma about him.
Right.
And so that would be undeniable. But after watching this unfold, that really is my ultimate conclusion, is that they are always going to disrespect the left. They're always going to swap the left aside, act like you're unserious, act like your candidates are ridiculous, pay you no mind whatsoever. I think they actually learned the lesson of Bernie.
They're gonna now you heard what he says. They're gonna always do that. So why are you gonna run and support another candidate in 2028, in 2032? Why are you gonna do that when you are acknowledging and admitting this particular point that he does here? Now I might come back to this to finish out at the 4-minute mark here. I gotta remember that I'm at the 4-minute mark. But let's now go to the announcement of her book tour resuming. Isn't that what this is? Maybe she couldn't parlay this into a book deal. So they say, hey, you wasn't even in the race long enough, ma'am. So she re-entered. But I think it could be a combination of that and definitely what she's seeing happen to Cornel West. Let's listen.
Hey, I have an important announcement to make. As of today, I am unsuspending my campaign for the presidency of the United States. I had suspended it because I was losing the horse race, but something so much more important than the horse race is at stake here, and we must respond. Right now, we have a fascist standing at the door. Everybody's all upset about it. Well, we should be upset about it, but we're not going to defeat the fascist by what? What is President Biden offering? He says, let's finish the job. Well, I hope you realize we're talking about millions of voters for whom they can't even survive unless they work at 2 or 3 jobs. What is he saying beyond, the economy is really doing well? Are you kidding me? For whom? It's doing well for 20% of us, and that's to be celebrated. But that 20% is on an island surrounded by a vast sea of economic despair. 39% of the American people report that they are regularly skipping meals in order to pay their rent. Over half of bankruptcies come from medical debt, 1 in 4 Americans carry. We're now living at a time where economic anxiety is experienced by the majority of people living paycheck to paycheck, the minimum wage not having been raised, and increasing militarism. What's going on here? Well, I'll tell you what's going on here. We, the people, basically don't own this country right now. Abraham Lincoln said that people who died in the Civil War for the Union had died so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from the earth. It's perishing now and on our watch. We're a government for all intents and purposes of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. And we need a president who says this. And we need a president who lays down an agenda and says, we're going to turn this thing around. We're going to take an economic U-turn. Who inspires the American people? We can do different. We can do better. That's what it is to make this country great again. To return it to a time when we actually had a thriving
Make this
middle
country
class.
great again.
And you don't do that with Donald Trump's policies. You do that with Medicare for all. You do it with tuition-free college and tech school. You do it with eliminating, using the Higher Education Act, the entire college loan debt. You do it with paid family leave and subsidized child care. You do it with guaranteed housing, guaranteed living wage, guaranteed sick pay. We change this world. We make it more beautiful. We have to respond to Donald Trump's dark vision of possibility. We need to have a peace academy as well as a military academy. We have to have armies of peace builders as well as armies of military personnel. We need to play peace games, not just war games. We need to learn to wage peace. And we need to end America's war on drugs. We need to have a ceasefire now. We need to have reparations. We need to have policies that actually expand opportunities and thus expand the economy and expand the possibilities for the future for our children and our children's children. We need to ramp down, not keep ramping up fossil fuel extraction. We need to take this country in a direction of hope and possibility and regeneration. That is the vision that will defeat Donald Trump, not let us finish the job. We're watching a car crash in slow motion here. Everybody knows it. Some people would say, oh, Ms. Williamson, you're delusional. I'll tell you what's delusional. What's delusional is just closing our eyes and crossing our fingers and just hoping that somehow Biden and Harris will be able to beat that juggernaut of dark, dark vision. No, we're going to defeat that juggernaut by lifting people up, lifting ourselves up to a realization that new beginnings are what America specializes in. It's what we were born from. We need to remember what our ancestors have done when they were challenged. We've done great things in this country. We're hardwired to do great things, and we have to do them now. I hope you go to Marianne2024.com, read our policies. We're still in this. Let's do this. This is serious. This is serious. We need to say to the American people, we see your pain, and we need to say to Donald Trump, we see your BS. Let's do this. Thanks so much. Spread the word.
So Joe Biden is right now committing a genocide. Joe Biden just had Uncommitted come out with 1,000 uncommitted votes. Joe Biden is doing the best that he can to end asylum. Joe Biden is doing his best Trump impression, trying to instill restrictive immigration executive orders. But Marianne Williamson comes out to talk about Donald Trump is the reason she's getting back in. That sounds serious. Let's replay it again. I wanted to play it all the way through before I go through and give my take. So let's listen again.
Hey, I have an important announcement to make. As of today, I am unsuspending my campaign for the presidency of the United States. I had suspended it because I was losing the horse race, but something so
I suspended it because I was losing the horse race. So let me unsuspend so I can continue to lose the horse race.
so much more important than the horse race is at stake here, and we must respond. Right now, we have a fascist standing.
There's more than there's more things more important than the horse race. So let me get in the horse race. That's what she said. I got out of this because I was losing the horse race. So I'm getting back into the horse race because there's more important things than the horse race.
standing at the door. Everybody's all upset about it. Well, we should be upset about it, but we're not going to defeat the fascist.
It's so awkward. I must say, isn't this awkward to do a video like this the entire time? What is this supposed to mean? Are you semi-upset about rejoining the horse race here?
By what? What is President Biden offering? He says, let's finish the job. Well, I hope you realize we're talking about millions of voters for whom they can't even survive unless they work at 2 or 3 jobs. What is he saying beyond, the economy is really doing well? Are you kidding me? For whom? It's doing well for 20% of us, and that's to be celebrated. But that 20% is on an island surrounded by a vast sea of economic.
That's these phrases that she makes up, vast sea of economic, those are the killers for me. It's like a person who is terrible at write raps. It's terrible. This person is terrible at being relatable, and she tries to come up with these things that make her more relatable, which they don't. Let's continue a little more of this.
Economic despair. 39% of the American people report that they are regularly skipping meals in order to pay their rent. Over half of bankruptcies come from medical debt. 1 in 4 Americans.
What's different? What has changed? All of what you're listing, Marianne Williamson, existed at the time when you suspended your campaign. Everything you're listing.
Terry, we're now living at a time where economic anxiety is experienced by the majority of people living paycheck to paycheck, the minimum wage not having been raised, and increasing militarism. What's going on here? Well,
it's weird how Marianne Williamson talks about militarism being a problem as she supports Ukraine war and she supports funding Israel. That's just weird to talk about a Department of Peace as you support sending money to Ukraine and Nazis.
Well, I'll tell you what's going on here. We, the people, basically don't own this country right now. Abraham Lincoln said that people who died in the Civil War for the Union had died so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
She's always going to be doing this. I've said this many times. When she tells stories, she talks about FDR. She talks about Lincoln. Lincoln said this. FDR said that. She does a lot of interjecting fantasy patriotic stories of our terrible ancestors, our terrible forefathers, I should say, not ancestors, terrible forefathers.
People would not perish from the earth. It's perishing now and on our watch. We're a government for all intents and purposes of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. And we need a president who says this. And we need a president who lays down an agenda and says, we're going to turn this thing around. We're going to take an economic U-turn, who inspires the American people. We can do different. We can do better. That's what it is to make this country great again. To return.
What does it mean that you're using a MAGA? What does it mean that you're using MAGA in your announcement speech? That's just weird to me, but I think I'm done with her speaking. Let's go to the article for the rest of this here. So we'll go to the article for a little bit more details on this joke of a campaign coming back. Williamson unsuspending presidential campaign. This is from The Hill. And let's make this a little bit smaller here. And we can get rid of this video. All right, so let's read a little bit. Maybe it's a short article. Let's maybe I'll read all of it. Let's see. All right, so author Marianne Williamson announced Wednesday that she is unsuspending in her presidential campaign, claiming American voters are watching a car crash in slow motion with the current candidates. I don't need to read her quote. We saw it on the screen. The long shot Biden challenger announced she was unsuspending her campaign in a video 3 weeks ago. She was suspending her campaign. I said unsuspending. She announced she was suspending her campaign 3 weeks ago. She acknowledged in Wednesday's video, that's today, that she dropped out because, quote, I was losing the horse race. But something so much more important than a horse race is at stake here, and we must respond. Williamson's announcement came just after the Michigan primary election results, where former Trump and President Biden easily won their respective primaries, but not without signs of some voters from both parties are unhappy about their likely nominee. In her video, the author called Trump a fascist who must be defeated. She also questioned Biden and his economic agenda. Williamson, a writer and progressive Democrat, ran to the left of Biden and hoped to appeal to voters who are not satisfied with establishment party politics. Critics have said her bid is not sophisticated enough to present a real threat to the Biden campaign, which has the support of the Democratic committee. She faced issues in her campaign before, experiencing staff issues. Now, I want to pause it right here because this is a great point. I never heard it described that way, but that actually is a good description. Critics have said her bid is not sophisticated enough to present a real threat to Biden. It's unserious. She argued Wednesday that, quote, we need a president, end quote, who will eliminate student loan debt, provide Medicare for all, tuition-free college, paid family leave, and guaranteed wages, among other initiatives. You know what social democrats, they love to be the furthest left on domestic policies like these. But do you understand, in order to get these domestic policies, there has to be a change in foreign policy. Where is this money for these things going to come from, if not the 900 on the books, what's on the books for the military and complex, over 1 trillion, what's not on the books? How are you going to get these things if you don't stop those things? This is what social democrats don't understand when they fall in line with the establishment narratives about war and militarism. You can fall in line with that, but how are you going to achieve these domestic priorities that you have if you do not drastically cut back on the military industrial complex? The $1 trillion literally spent on the military industrial complex could fix the tuition, could fix family paid leave, could fix Medicare for all, could completely fix homelessness. They're connected, in other words. Continuing with the article, Williamson also highlighted the economic issues facing many Americans in her comeback message. A majority of Americans experience economic anxiety, and she argued that returning the country to a time when we actually had thriving middle class is what it means to be an American great again, to make America great again. It's just weird that she's using the same mantra as Trump to say, make America great again. But Marianne Williamson unsuspending her presidential campaign. That is the headline. Let's go back to Twitter. To see what we're going to be covering, closing out here, because we will be closing out in just 10, 15 minutes or so. But I do want to go through my feed. Remember how I do this at the end of my streams all the time? We're going to go through our feed to see anything breaking. So what's breaking right now is what I want to find out. Here's Bree. Israeli forces fired on food convoy in Gaza. UN documents and satellite analysis reveal. Look at this meme. Sure, I'm committing a genocide in Palestine, but Trump is going to commit a genocide in Palestine too. So vote for me. the lesser of two genociders, huh? Is that what we're doing? Heartland's Media posting. In a surprise move, Illinois judge removed Trump from ballot based on insurrection ban. The decision is paused, giving him time to appeal. So apparently Chicago removed Trump off. This is Jimmy Dore. People like Chris Cuomo, who shamed us for asking reasonable questions about experimental medicine treatment with no long-term effects, are now waking up to the fact that they were lied to by Big Pharma. So that's Jimmy Dore pointing out coverage by Chris Cuomo. Breakthrough news. Pro-Palestinian supporters disrupt Rep. Kathy Castro in Tampa, Florida. Let's listen to this direct action for Palestine. I'll make it large and we will watch it now.
You voted for it. Add that to your resume. Add that to your resume. We are killing children, and by tomorrow, another 100 kids will be dead with the money that she's sending overseas to Israel. That's the truth. I need to remember yesterday setting himself on fire in protest. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now and stop killing children overseas. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. 70%.
Wow, kept getting interrupted.
You are not even doing the bare minimum. You do not care about black and brown children. You are okay with their murder. And you support genocide.
Love it. Love it. People love seeing that. That is, again, this is pro-Palestinian supporters disrupt U.S. Rep. Kathy Castro in Tampa, Florida. Castro, the head of the Children's Health Caucus, voted in favor of U.S. funding Israel war, which has killed 12,000 Palestinian children. Isn't that something? She's over some child advocacy group as they're killing 12,000 kids in Palestine. Just ridiculous. At least 101 children killed in the West Bank this year. That's the West Bank. That's not Gaza. Any other breaking stories? I'm going to skim through here. Here's Sabby. The Gray Zone debunked the New York Times sexual assault story early on. How did the New York Times hire a former IDF member to cover the war? It's a former IDF member. It came out. Is covering the war for the New York Times. Isn't that something? Israel support have been circulating a fake screenshot of Aaron Bushell's account saying Palestine will be free when all the Jews are dead. So yeah, that's what they're doing with him. Isn't that something? All right, so let me see if there's anything else. This looks old because Tucker is not on Fox anymore. So that looks like that's old. Massive credit for this story. Largest media scandal exposed. New York Times article about Hamas was written by IDF soldier. Wow. Maybe I'll play that. That's by Crystal Ball. Let's see what this is. IDF shoulder, New York Times. Let's see. I'm just curious. IDF New York Times. Let's see what comes up. Let's see what comes up here. Same video, same video. Aris, I saw this video on TikTok. So I'll play this TikTok video. It covers what they're saying. in a shorter version. So Breaking Points looks like they're covering this, but it's an 8-minute video. I'm not going to play this at the end. I can play this though. It's only 3 minutes. I can play this as an outro video. So we'll play this as an outro video. It's time to get up out of here, everybody. Please, 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 I ask of you to get us to 800 likes. The 800 like threshold seems to be very beneficial. So please get us to 800 likes for this stream. Hit that like button. There's been well over, let me see, 1,400 people that have watched this stream, 1,400 different people. So we should be able to easily get to 800. There's currently 500 people watching right now, and the majority of you have not hit that like button. So hit that like button. Get us to 800 likes. I'm going to play this video as an outro. Let me know where you live. Let me know where you live. Whatever comment you have, include where you live, and I will put it up. So the city, state, the country. So if you have a comment about Joe Biden is Genocide Joe from Atlanta, Georgia. If you have a comment about Marianne Williamson needs to unsuspend her campaign again and go away from Long Beach, California. Include where you are and whatever comment you leave. We just crossed 500 likes. We only need another 300. Get us another 300 likes, and we should be A-okay. Don't forget to check out our merchandise, and one of our most popular items that we're selling is our NATO hoodie. So check that out. It comes in a couple of different colors. Our NATO hoodie. Check that out. And here we go. Thank you for watching. Actually, let me make sure I don't have any more super chats. Actually, I do. Let me read the super chat first before I get out of here. This super chat here, John M. in Minnesota. I think that's right. Thank you for the super chat. New sub, future Patreon. Thanks for your incisive commentary. I think I'm saying that right. Incisive commentary. And the chat is giving me much needed comical relief. Our chat is always based. Thank you, John. Welcome aboard from Minnesota. This one here, Miss McMillan, keep speaking truth. Thank you, Miss McMillan. I love the avatar, the graphic you have for your account. And I think I did this one, but I'll shout out the new member again. Thank you. Right in Aaron Bushel. I don't know if I read that earlier. If I missed it, sorry about that. And then another member, I'll just shout out the new members again, another new member. And then I'll shout out Landrew also because he gave us this generous super chat of $100. Thank you for that. All right, that's all I got. I'm going to play this video and throw up your comments. Make sure your comments have your city, state, and or country. Thank you for watching.
I'm going to present some of the evidence that anti-Palestinian voices are being platformed in newsrooms in really dangerous ways. I'm going to give 2 examples. So the first of them is the New York Times reporting on rape in Israel on October 7th. I'm not questioning the possibility that sexual violence took place. What I'm looking at is what counts as credible evidence and which voices are being platformed. This was a huge front page cover story, and one of the authors of this piece is somebody called Anat Schwartz. Anat was not a journalist prior to October 2023, prior to this cover story. According to multiple sources, she had no reporting experience. She was a filmmaker who had made a movie about Israel called The Promised Land. She also, according to this Wikipedia page, which has since been edited, used to work in intelligence for the Israeli military. Now, before editors greenlight pieces, they very often look at our social media to make sure that we are, in fact, neutral, unbiased sources of information. If they would have looked at Anat's social media, they would have seen that she had liked several anti-Palestinian tweets, including this one here, which called for Gaza to be turned into a slaughterhouse. In the days after this article came out, it was a huge, huge deal. So the New York Times podcast, The Daily, had planned on doing an episode about it, but they quietly shelved it. And the reason why they chose not to cover this reporting was in part because the family members of one of the key victims that was included in this article distanced themselves from it. So they said that actually the reporters had manipulated them and that there was no evidence that their family member had been raped. I should also mention, by the way, that another one of the authors on this, Adam Seller, is the 24-year-old nephew of Annette Schwartz. So it's really hard to hold the phone up. I should also mention, I guess, that just over a week ago, the UN found, quote, credible allegations that Palestinian women had been raped by Israeli soldiers, but the New York Times hasn't considered that worthy of being reported on. It's not just the New York Times, so I'll give one other example, which comes from the Wall Street Journal, right? So this was an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal in February, and it found that apparently the clues were there all along, that members of a UN agency had links to the October 7th attacks. And one of the authors of this piece is somebody called Carrie Keller-Lynn. This is Carrie Keller-Lynn during her time in the IDF. This was an interview that she did where she talked about her friend Eliza, who literally created social media for the IDF. But again, Carrie is considered a neutral and impartial source to report on this. These unsubstantiated claims about links between the UN agency and October 7th were widely reported on. And as a result of those reports, funding to the agency was dramatically cut. So all of these countries either cut or suspended their funding to this agency with dramatic effect. This UN agency keeps people in Gaza alive. And this decision to cut money from the agency has accelerated the pace of Palestinian death. These institutions are willing to undermine their own credibility in order to put forth unsubstantiated claims from biased sources that serve to further the narrative of this Israeli government.
DNA tests are illegal in Israel. Ask me why.
It's even illegal in the state of Israel to obtain this. And if you do obtain it, it's illegal to show it and or talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, my DNA. Now you might ask yourself, why is it illegal to obtain this in the state of Israel? Because it proves through your DNA that Jews around the world have no ancestral ties to the land of Israel.
I mean, duh. It doesn't take a PhD or an article from a Jewish newspaper to tell you that Caucasians practicing a religion aren't native to a place where people have been brown for millennia.
This TikTok caused a storm online, with many debating what his results, which show no trace of being from Palestine or the Middle East, despite being Jewish, mean. Yet, in the state of Israel, getting hold of a genealogical DNA test is highly restricted. Yet Dov Aharonoff and the Jerusalem Post reported in 2019 that Israel's genetic information law blocks people from buying them from local pharmacies.
I guess boomer Zionists think that if you just throw enough money at troll farms and you don't let people Google 23andMe in Israel, that they'll forget that they're not Middle Eastern. Like, it's not Jesus of Williamsburg, it's Jesus of Nazareth, right? I mean, that's fine. Like, there are dark Jews. There's Jews from Brazil, there's Jews from Ethiopia, and up until the 19th century, everybody was living in Palestine pretty peacefully. Well, I guess until the Nakba, when they got displaced or killed alongside the Muslims and the Christians. I guess even back then, in the middle of the desert, if you have a brown neighbor, I guess property values go down. I don't make the rules, but they sure as hell are racist as So then, if Caucasian Jews don't come from the Middle East, where do they come from? I do not want to be called anti-Semitic, even if I've got Harvard in the background. So I'm just going to let another Ashkenazi geneticist tell you where you come from.
Surprisingly, GPS took us to northeastern Turkey. At first, we did not understand the results, but when we looked at some old books, we found 4 ancient villages named Ishkenaz, Eskenaz, Ashenaz, and Ashkuz, names that may be derived from the word Ashkenaz. This place resides on a hub of trade networks. This is where Silk Roads and other trade routes converge.
That's Aaron Hayek. He's a Jewish geneticist from Johns Hopkins who wanted to figure out where Caucasian Jews come from because, you know, like map out genome, get ahead of diseases. His contact in Israel is Dr. Aurelia Oppenheim. She's a geneticist in the University of Jerusalem, and she runs the anti-aging department. And for a while, the government called both of these two Nazis. Would you like to know why? Because they both figured out where Caucasian Jews come from. Wink, wink. They're 40% Turkish, and newsflash, 40% Mongolian. As if the lactose intolerance didn't give it away. Like, hold on. Do you understand what this means? Like, okay, sure. Like, you don't have any ancestral tie to Israel, but like you don't have yellow fever. You're just dating your own race. Like real talk. What do you see in this picture? Like, is it a pierogi or is it a dumpling? Like, you say gefilte fish, I just see fish balls without the soup. Like, brother!